So there is continued interest on the part of Iran to stay in this deal. It's in their own economic self-interest to do so. And I guess I'd add, Iran wasn't racing to a weapon before the deal. There is no indication that I'm aware of that if the deal no longer existed, that they would immediately turn to racing to create a nuclear weapon today.
Well, my concern is certainly that they have realized the benefits of the agreement. In the end, I voted against the agreement. I applauded the last president for negotiations. I thought that it should have been presented as a treaty before this body. I think it would have been a better agreement and something that I could have supported. But now that it is in effect and Iran has realized the benefits of it economically, I think that we ought to think long and hard about giving Iran now the ability, if we exit the agreement, to continue on the nuclear side and not uphold the obligations that they agreed to under the treaty. So I know that that's being considered. And then the other, with regard to North Korea, I am happy that the president is talking. That discussions at the highest level are had. I've always agreed that presidents and secretaries of state and others ought to talk to rogue leaders. But I am concerned, I think, and a lot of Americans are, that these discussions that usually take place in that regard at the head of state level are preceded by a lot of negotiations, meetings, and deliberation by people like yourself and your able diplomats who, if you're confirmed, will have at the State Department. Do you have some of those concerns as well, that this first meeting that's being discussed will take place perhaps prematurely before the hard negotiations that must be done by skilled diplomats simply will not have been done?
Senator, there is work being done today in preparation for the president's proposed meeting with Kim Jong-un. So American people, and you should know, there's work being done in preparation for that. The president's view has been, and I agree with him, the model that we have used previously, long negotiations to get the two leaders to the table, hasn't happened. We haven't had that opportunity to have these two leaders sit together to try to resolve this incredibly vexing, difficult challenge. So the president's judged that if the two of them, there'll be lots of work to do. No one is under any illusions that we will reach a comprehensive agreement through the president's meeting, but to set out the conditions that would be acceptable to each side for the two leaders who will ultimately make the decision about whether such an agreement can be achieved and then set in place. I'm optimistic that the United States government can set the conditions for that appropriately so that the president and the North Korean leader can have that conversation and will set us down the course of achieving a diplomatic outcome that America and the world so desperately need.
Is there some concern that exiting the Iran agreement might play poorly with regard to a possible agreement with the North Koreans? It would seem that if you're the North Korean leader or negotiators on that side, they might be concerned at our reliability in terms of signing an agreement if the next president could simply exit it.
Senator, while I'll concede we don't know precisely what Kim Jong-un is contemplating, how he's thinking about his option set today, I've read lots of the analysis with respect to what his concerns and how he's thinking about the challenge he faces today with the enormous economic pressure that has been placed upon him. And the lists of things that he is thinking about don't involve other deals throughout history. It's not the case he's focused on did we pull out of the START treaty. He's thinking about how it is he can set conditions so that while we talk about complete, verifiable reversal of his nuclear program, he's thinking about the sustainment of his regime. What are the tools, what are the assurances that can be put in place that aren't reversible? He's going to be looking for something more than a piece of paper. He's going to be looking for a set of conditions to be put in place so that he can undertake a task, denuclearizing his country that for decades no one believed could occur.
Thank you. Turning to Africa for a minute, Senator Coons and I just traveled to 4 countries in Africa, including Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's going through a transition. They have a new leader. Elections are scheduled for July and August, and we don't have an ambassador there. Will you commit to ensure that we have an ambassador on the ground? I know a lot of that depends on us, but we tend to move it through as quickly as we can in this committee. But ambassador on the ground in Zimbabwe when that transition occurs, the elections are held.
Yes, Senator, it will actually in the first instance depend on me and the President to get a nomination to you, and I commit to doing that post haste if I'm confirmed.
Thank you. I'll take offline and submit additional questions on Cuba. We've had some private discussions on this. I'm concerned, similar vein, that we have just a skeletal staff there in the embassy, given the issues that occurred there. But I think that it's an important time there. We're going to have a non-Castro head of state for the first time later this month.
Yes.
And so anyway, if we could beef that staff up, it'd be great as well.
Thank you, Senator Flake.
Thank you. Senator Udall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your service, Director Pompeo, and we really appreciate having your family here, and look forward to you answering our questions. I want to follow up. I've worked with Senator Flake quite a bit on Cuba and follow up on the Cuba issue. Cuba's about to choose its first leader who is not a Castro, yet the U.S. presence in the country has been reduced significantly, and as a result, other countries are filling this vacuum. Will you work to help improve ties with Cuba, a relationship that benefits many states hoping to increase trade with the island? As you know, when I visited with you in my office, I talked about how many governors have gone to Cuba and said, with their agricultural folks, and said, Cuba has 11 million people. We want to sell food products to them, agricultural products to them. So will you work to improve ties with Cuba?
Senator, I recall joking with you about Kansas wheat. The answer to your question is yes. Senator Flake had asked about the ambassador, the diplomatic presence there. I think everyone's aware of some of the concerns, but I assure you, and I'll assure Senator Flake as well, we will, consistent with making sure we can keep these folks safe, we will build out a team there that will deliver American diplomacy to Cuba in a way that represents the finest of America.
Now, as you know, U.S. internet companies, Cuba has very, very little internet capacity, and this is one of the things I think really could open Cuba up to the world. Do you believe the United States companies should lead the effort to help bring the internet to Cuba?
Senator, that question sounds like there may be something buried there that I'm not aware of. So if I might.
Now, come on, Mr. Chairman.
So at the risk of demonstrating ignorance, I'd prefer the chance to talk to my experts at the State Department and work my way through it.
Okay, and it's there's nothing really tricked there. I mean, I've worked with a number of members of this committee and others outside the committee to try to push the effort to have the internet be a big part of what our first push in Cuba. As you know very well, and we talked about this in my office too, the State Department and Defense Department work hand in glove on these crucial issues, and the job of the State Department is to try to make sure we don't get into unnecessary wars. Your work, I think, is to work hard at diplomacy, search for peace, do what we can, and make sure that we don't get into another war. Are you committed to robust diplomacy, as our ranking member Senator Menendez talked about, and committed to do everything you can to prevent future wars?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up also on several members on the Iran deal. Director Pompeo, the Iran deal has effectively cut off all pathways to an Iranian nuclear weapons program. Compliance has been certified repeatedly by the International Atomic Energy Agency and both Israeli and U.S. intelligence agencies, one which you oversee. Yet you have said that, and I quote here, Iran will have the freedom to build an arsenal of nuclear weapons at the end of the commitment, end quote. However, even when the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action sunsets under the current deal, Iran will still remain a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and a party to the IAEA's additional protocol. IAEA inspectors are not going anywhere, and if they did, the United States and the global community would have ample time to react to any breakout. And in fact, the international community, through the Secretary General, spoke out as to the importance of the JCPOA very recently. In view this position in light of your apparent support for U.S. policy of regime change in Iran, really, the contrast there really upsets me. In 2014, you said you would have preferred military strikes to the JCPOA, and I quote here, this is your quote, "It is under 2,000 sorties to destroy the Iranian nuclear capacity. This is not an insurmountable task for the coalition forces," end quote. Is this your current position, and are you for a first military strike?
I'm not, Senator. I'm absolutely not. I don't think that's what I said that day. I'd have to go back and review. With respect to the quote that you provided, I know a little bit more about what it would take today, but in terms of what I described as the capacity to achieve what I was speaking to that day, I think I'm still pretty close. But there is no doubt that this administration's policy, and my view, is that the solution to preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, to finding ourselves in the same place we are in North Korea, in Iran, is through diplomacy.
Yeah. Do you have any evidence to dispute the IAEA assessment that Iran is in full compliance with the JCPOA?
Senator, with the information that I've been provided, I've seen no evidence that they are not in compliance today. I think your question is, do you have any? The answer is no.
Yeah, and I would just hope, I'm very near to the end of my time here, I would just hope that you understand that the international community and the United States working together is what got us to the point where we are. And so I think it would be very unfortunate if we're the one that pulls back and sets the stage for a very chaotic future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator
Mr. Chairman.
Before turning to Senator Gardner, on that note, do you have any sense that Chancellor Merkel and Macron's visits here, that subject matter will be discussed? They will be here before May 12th.
Senator, I've not seen the agenda, but I'd be shocked if it didn't come up.
And so there's still the possibility of the three that matter coming together on a framework, and as we get closer to that time, maybe people will be a little more focused on that occurring.
Senator, I having had some interactions with my European counterparts, I am confident that issue will be discussed at some length. It's important to them, and I know they'll raise their hopes and concerns when they travel here to the United States in the coming days.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Pompeo, congratulations on the nomination to your family. Thank you for your commitment to service. This is no easy task that you are about to take a part of, and I appreciate your willingness to serve our country once again. Thank you. Director Pompeo and I had an incredible opportunity to serve together in the House Energy and Commerce Committee for a number of years.
We were with Senator Markey.
And so there are several of us on this committee, and we had the opportunity to sit next to each other to work together, and I can tell my colleagues on the committee that there is no one who came better prepared, more understanding of the issues, and always looking for a creative answer. And the diligence that he pursued that work to find that creative solution, I think, is something that I always admired about his work in the House. And I know that continued as director of the CIA and will continue upon his confirmation at the State Department. I have one request, Director Pompeo, that is very important to me. As Secretary of State, Kansas will have no greater authority over water than they do right now. So anyway, we won't get into water fights between Colorado and Kansas right now. I would like to submit for the record, if I could, ask consent to submit a letter written by former senior government officials with national security experience in administrations of different parties or on Capitol Hill, people including General Alexander, Michael Allen, Jeremy Bash, General McCasey, ask for the record to be submitted.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Pompeo, you and I have had a number of opportunities to talk about Asia. If you look at Asia, it was written once that this is the most consequential region for America's future. The largest armies in the world will camp in Asia. The most powerful navies in the world will gather. Over 1/2 of the world's commerce will take place. 2/3 of the world will travel. 5 of America's 7 defense treaties located in Asia. It's the region where 2 superpowers will compete to determine which world order will prevail. Director Pompeo, several of us on the committee, Senator Markey, Senator Rubio, and I are working on legislation that would help speak with one voice, the administration, Congress, when it comes to Asia, creating a reassurance initiative that will allow us to focus on 3 areas: economic matters, security matters, rule of law, democracy matters. Over the last Congress, we held a number of hearings focusing on those 3 areas. In addition, a 4th hearing that focused on this reassurance initiative and our effort to understand the future of a U.S.-China relationship, something that has at times been described as a Thucydides trap by both Graham Allison and I believe President Xi when he was here. Director Pompeo, do you believe it is important that Congress and the administration speak with one voice as it relates to Asia and our Asia policy?
Senator, I do. You shared the outlines of that legislation to me. I look forward to working with you to see if we can get it right and do good for America by joining together to accomplish that.
Could you share with me some of the priorities you think should be in a comprehensive Asia policy?
Oh, goodness. So step 1, obviously, is diplomacy, making sure that there aren't mistakes, that we don't talk past each other, we don't end up. You talked about the Thucydides trap. The ability to avoid that almost certainly depends on the capacity for the 2 nations to speak to the things that they have as their central interests, their core interests, and then those things that are of second-order importance, where cooperation will be the mark of the day. I think diplomacy leads that effort. As I think we would all agree, absent a strong America, the rest of the things pale in comparison. We've got to make sure we have robust economic growth. The underpinnings of our capacity to have the leverage to achieve good diplomatic outcomes depend on that. And so we need to be sure that America does the things it needs to do, so we have not just 2018, 19, and 20, but a long-term horizon of economic prosperity.
But I think you would agree with me as well that the creation of a long-term policy, a generational policy, so to speak, on Asia, an Indo-Pacific strategy is what we need, not just a 4-year, 8-year presidential term strategy.
No, that's right. That's why what you describe is important, because when the questions get asked about China, we can never forget that they live in a complicated region with lots of countries with widely varying interests, and a Chinese government that is intent on expanding their capacity to have not only economic influence in those countries, but using that economic tool to achieve political influence in those countries as well. We need a thoughtful long-term strategy that prevents that from taking place.
And we'll get into China a little bit more either now or during the next round of questions, but I think it's important to note that even today, China has announced live fire exercises in the Taiwan Straits. We've seen the clear militarization of the South China Sea, and these are just a few of the challenges we have that have been lingering for a number of years, but certainly increasing in their importance today. I want to shift right now, though, to North Korea. Do you agree with Secretary Mattis that North Korea is the most urgent security threat the United States faces?
I do.
This committee has led the efforts over the past several years to increase maximum pressure on North Korea and the Kim Jong-un regime with passage of legislation, the North Korea Sanctions Policy Enhancement Act, and also working together to assure maximum pressure is applied. Senator Markey and I have introduced legislation known as the LEAD Act, the leverage to enhance effective diplomacy, which would impose a trade embargo on Pyongyang and its enablers. Will the administration's maximum pressure and engagement policy mean a continued pursuit of third-party entities and financial institutions who engage in significant trade with Pyongyang?
Yes.
Will you commit to advance this LEAD Act and others like it that include mandatory sanctions against these entities?
Well, I'm not familiar with the details.
It's a great bill.
The president has made clear the continuation of the pressure campaign is the tool that enables the opportunity to achieve a successful diplomatic outcome in North Korea.
And briefly, we have about a minute left here. Can you share with me the exact goals of the presidential summit between the United States and North Korea?
Yes, I believe I can. It is to develop an agreement with the North Korean leadership such that the North Korean leadership will step away from its efforts to hold America at risk with nuclear weapons, completely and verifiably.
To be clear, again, the only goal the United States has as it relates to North Korea is the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the North Korean.
I want to be careful about complete. North Korea also has a significant military arsenal, one of the largest armies in the world. We need to ensure that we continue to provide a strategic deterrence framework for our allies in the region, the South Koreans, the Japanese, and others as well. But the purpose of the meeting is to address this nuclear threat to the United States.
And our goal remains the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. That's what you said, right?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Pompeo, congratulations for this nomination. During the negotiation over the Iran nuclear deal in 2014, you opposed the deal and you stated, quote, "It's under 2,000 sorties to destroy the Iranian nuclear capacity. This is not an insurmountable task for the coalition forces." A number of people opposed the deal, but you were somewhat unique in publicly venturing the thought that military action might be preferable to a deal or easier than some folks were suggesting. Where did you get the notion that destroying Iran's nuclear capacity could be accomplished with 2,000 air sorties?
Senator, it was based on the things that I'd learned as a member of Congress.
Your military career and as a member of the House Intel Committee.
Senator, yes, I think that's right. I'm trying to remember the timing of the statement. I think I would have been serving on the Intelligence Committee at that point in time.
Would you have, at the time, did you have any reluctance to share that assessment publicly? That seems like a pretty specific sort of an assessment. To say I'm confident in our capacity is one thing. To publicly discuss that it would be 2,000 sorties to wipe out the Iranian nuclear capacity struck me as odd. Did you have any reluctance to share that at the time?
Senator, I wasn't. No classified information was contained in that simple statement.
Wouldn't that sort of specificity probably rely on an awful lot of classified information or OPLAN?
Senator, 2,000 is a pretty big round number. There was no effort here to make any specificity. Might have been 1,000, might have been 3,000, right? There was no aim here to communicate it. But I actually, to your point,
well, you weren't trying to be inaccurate in your statement.
No, Senator, absolutely not. I never try to do that. But if I might, and we may disagree about this, Senator, I do think it's important. I absolutely think it's important to provide diplomats with the opportunity to be successful. Countries that are adverse to us don't often accede to our desires absent a rationale for doing so, right? So diplomats without any strength, diplomats without any capacity, are just sitting there talking.
Well, I agree. I think stating that we have a lot of capacity is one thing. I was just struck by the specificity. Would it be your norm to share that kind of information publicly in such specific detail?
Senator, I'm confident if I'd done it multiple times, you'd raise them with me here today.
Your assessment, I wonder whether your assessment, did you assume that Iran might respond to an attack by the United States, or were you just assuming that they would do nothing?
Senator, I don't know that I don't know in the context of that statement that I was thinking about.
But you would agree with me that the extent of force that the U.S. would need to use to destroy Iran's nuclear capacity would depend pretty significantly on whether Iran would fight to protect against an attack on its own soil.
Absolutely, Senator.
And then you ventured that the attack would not be an insurmountable task for our coalition forces. And I'm curious about that, too. Most of our coalition forces in 2014 were sitting around the table with us trying to do a peaceful negotiation to end Iran's nuclear capacity. It sounds as if you had confidence that the U.S. could not do a deal and then convince coalition partners to join us in bombing Iran. I'm curious what coalition partners you were thinking about as you made that comment.
Senator, I wasn't thinking of any particular coalition partners when I made that statement.
Those comments, when I heard them about the relative ease of a war against Iran, reminded me of the run-up to the Iraq War. Vice President Cheney said we'd be greeted as liberators. The president said there were definitely weapons of mass destruction. Secretary Rumsfeld said the invasion would largely be self-financing and would last, quote, 5 weeks or 5 months. It certainly is not going to last any longer. Of course, we know that the cost to the United States was 4,400 soldiers dead, 500,000 Iraqis dead, a price tag now topping $3 trillion, an unprecedented turmoil in the region. And most of those facts were known at the time that you made that statement in 2014. Let me say this. I'm one of 2 senators who serve on both the Foreign Relations and the Armed Services Committees. I represent a state that's deeply committed to the nation's military mission. I have a son in the military. I honor your military service, your entire public service. I think my mission on these 2 committees is sort of 2 things. dramatically reduce the risk of unnecessary war, raise the probability that we decisively win any war that we need to be in. I also firmly believe that we shouldn't be at war without a vote of Congress. And your actions as a House member suggested that you and I probably see this somewhat the same way. In 2011, I criticized President Obama for putting us into military action against Libya without a vote, and you voted twice to oppose military action unless it was authorized by Congress. In 2014, President Obama came to this committee to ask for the military authority to strike Syria. You supported that in the House. I supported it here in the Senate. The committee supported it. Now, President Trump has ordered missile strikes fired at Syria last year. He didn't seek congressional approval. The U.S. conducted airstrikes against the Syrian military in February without congressional approval. The president is tweeting that he might do additional military strikes in Syria now, and he's also aiming words directly at Russia. As far as I know, Syria has not declared war against the United States. Has Congress given the president specific authority to wage war against Syria?
Senator, I think you and I actually do share a similar bias for the executive and legislative branches both to be involved when such momentous decisions about war are undertaken. Now that I'm in the executive branch, my views on that have not changed.
And you would agree with me that waging a war requires both a domestic and an international legal justification?
Yes, Senator, I would. With respect, you asked about I don't want to dodge your very specific question. You asked about Syria. For a long time, multiple administrations have found that the president has authority to act and take certain actions without first coming to Congress to seek approval, whether it was Kosovo. The list from Democrats and Republicans is long and like. Just to close, I share your view. In each case where it is where we can, America and our soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines are better off if we have the entirety of the United States government working together and having authorized the activity.
For the past year, I've been trying to secure the administration's detailed legal justification for last April's strikes on the Syria military base in Syria. The administration has not fully provided it. And there is reportedly a memo that is laying out a description of what the president or the administration feels are the appropriate executive powers. Would you support the release of the non-classified portion of that memo to Congress so that we can see what the president thinks his powers are and engage in a productive dialogue about that?
So I learned about this memo. I think you shared it with me. I was unaware of that. I promise I'll work alongside you to do the best I can to get you that information. And if it's a classified version of it that you have a right as a member of the legislative branch to see, I'll work to get you that. And if it's an unclassified version, we'll work to achieve that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before turning to Senator Young, so then specifically, a surgical strike against, let's just use the last one that occurred with 59 Tomahawk missiles. Do you believe that does require an authorization from Congress?
Senator, multiple administrations have taken those kinds of activities under the president's authority.
Yeah. So I was ranking member when our chairman and I and the committee wrote an authorization for the use of force against Syria that unfortunately was not used and has changed the course of history, unfortunately, and displaced millions of people and hundreds of thousands of people are dead. And not to say that that would have necessarily prevented all of that, but certainly would have changed the trajectory significantly. I agree with you, and I've shared that with the president just in the last very short period of time, that I do not believe that should he choose to take a surgical strike against Syria, that an authorization from us is necessary just based on a body of evidence that we have and the things that have occurred in the past. And I like you, oppose strongly what we did in Libya. And I think that's complicating our efforts in North Korea because of obvious reasons. So with that, Senator Young.
Welcome, Mr. Director, and congratulations on your nomination. My point of emphasis as I start here won't be on trying to identify some areas of principled disagreement. I suspect if we worked hard enough, we might be able to find some of those, but I want to emphasize the importance of having a smart, experienced, individual as our next Secretary of State. Based on my time serving with you in the House of Representatives, you've certainly checked those boxes. And we also need a leader who's credible, not just with our own president, but with leaders around the world. And you've also checked that box. So I want to encourage you, and I anticipate supporting you. In our March visit in our office, we spent much of our time talking about crises around the world. You'll certainly be immersed in these should you be confirmed. But we also spent a lot of time talking about communication, the level of responsiveness of the State Department. And I was quite candid with you about my unhappiness from time to time with the Department of State and the level of responsiveness I'd seen over the last year or so, though it has significantly improved. There's been an uptick in dialogue between the department and my office, and I think this committee more generally in recent months. We have an Article I responsibility, which you understand very well. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction that oversees the State Department. And I just want to get you on record here. You indicated in your prepared statement that you were prepared to pick up our calls on the first ring. I think that's exactly the sort of message that you ought to be sending. So to be clear, do you commit to ensure that the Department of State provides timely and responsive answers to me and my office?
Senator, as a CI director, I adopted the Leon Panetta model, which was more time, more cups of coffee, have real interactions, whether you agree or disagree with a particular member, to do that and to provide the committee the documents to which they are duly entitled as elected officials. I'll promise to do that for you.
That's refreshing. Thank you. Mr. Director, do you agree that the U.S. national security, our national security depends in large measure on a vibrant and growing economy?
I do.
In your prepared testimony, you mentioned China's systematic policies of stealing our intellectual property, of forced technology transfer, and associated activities. You also mentioned just moments ago that China is using mostly economic tools against us to achieve broader geopolitical, geostrategic ends. Do you believe these policies by Beijing have already undermined, and if they continue unabated, will continue to undermine our ability as a country to realize our potential for economic growth, to incentivize investment in key technologies and key sectors of our economy, and to sustain the financial wherewithal that is required to defend our country and advance our values worldwide?
Yes, Senator, I do. I think those risks are real. I think they're on us today. That is, I think we're in the midst of that. This is not some future risk that's presented to the country. I think we have to confront it today. Most directly on point is the enormous amount of intellectual property that has left the hands, sometimes taken, sometimes coerced out of the hands of U.S. companies. The imagination and creativity of the American workforce has delivered it, and the Chinese have taken it away from us. We have to develop a robust set of tools. CFIUS here, domestic, there's a bunch of tools that we need, and to do that well, such that we can prevent that from continuing to happen in the future.
Well, relatedly, earlier you spoke of the need for, my words, a China strategy. So my sense is you believe we need a whole-of-government, well-coordinated, informed, strategic response to China's coercive, illicit, and deceptive economic and trade practices. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator Young.
Well, I do too. And that's why I intend to introduce this month some legislation on this very topic. I'm going to require, through this legislation, working with my colleagues and the administration, the periodic production of a national economic security strategy. I'd welcome the opportunity to work with the administration, you in particular, and any colleague who shares these goals. I think we'll get this across the line. It's needed now more than ever. Do you believe that a U.S. response, Mr. Director, to China will be more effective if we assemble a multilateral coalition of allies and key trade partners who also have suffered due to Beijing's economic policies and trade practices to create a unified international front to apply maximum pressure on Beijing to achieve our objectives, as opposed to a merely bilateral dynamic, which I perceive we have now?
I agree with that. I mean, conceptually, if we can get the countries of Southeast Asia, more broadly in Asia, and others to jointly set up a framework that achieves what it is that you've described as our objective, we are far more likely to achieve most or all of it.
Mr. Director, given the challenges we confront with Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, and beyond, do you believe our nation's need for effective diplomacy will decrease in the coming year or two?
Senator, it seems unimaginable, but if I'm good enough, right? If we can, I am hopeful that we can begin to take some of these challenges away. I was mindful. I had all the former CIA directors in, nearly all of them attended, and to a person, they'd been there, some of them 20 and 25 years ago. They said, Mike, the stack has only gotten longer. We haven't pulled one of these problem sets from the pile, and we need to do that. We need to start to solve some of these.
So your response, though humorous, actually is something I'd like to shine a light on, because the previous occupant of this Secretary of State position once indicated that part of the rationale behind his funding request for the Department of State was that there would be less of a need on account of highly effective near-term diplomacy for as much funding. Now, any large organization here in Washington or beyond can be made more efficient, and we can identify funding decreases that might be made. But I would regard it as a risky strategy to assume that your highly effective diplomacy is going to be a strong rationale for funding cuts. Are you operating under the premise that highly effective diplomacy will lead to lower funding requests in the international account moving forward?
No. When I said that, I am optimistic. I'm hopeful. This is the task to which we're engaged, but I can't see anything in the 6 or 12 or 24-month time horizon that would permit us to have any less demand for diplomatic resources.
Strikes me as responsible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Former House Energy Committee cohort to the witness, Senator Markey.
Doctor, thank you. Along with Senator Gardner and many others, 50, many members. So welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the threat of nuclear war. In North Korea, I'm glad to hear that you believe that we should exhaust all options before resorting to military conflict. I agree with you, but I do not believe that we have yet exhausted all options. You've spoken about setting conditions for success in advance of President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un, and I am right now very concerned that the lack of a coherent policy in North Korea could lead to a very poor meeting. And if that meeting goes poorly, some might reach the conclusion that both economic pressure and diplomatic engagement have failed. National Security Advisor John Bolton has recently outlined the case for preventative military strikes on North Korea. Are there any conditions under which you would support preventative military strikes against North Korea as Secretary of State?
Senator, thanks for your question. That phrase, preventive military strikes, has a long history. Lots of folks have different views. I want to be careful. There's a legal view. There's preemption. I want to stay away from the legal. Let me give you my judgment, my diplomatic and national security judgment on that. I want to start with the predicate of your question. While I don't want to speculate or hypothesize on how the negotiation might go, it's my full anticipation that however that meeting goes, there will be enormous diplomatic work yet remaining. To your point, we have not yet exhausted our capacity there. I think there's an awfully long way to go. The President has made clear, and I agree with him, that there may come that day. There may come the day when we see an arsenal of nuclear weapons capable of striking the United States of America. The President has made clear his intention to prevent that from happening. And to the extent that diplomatic tools and other tools that America has as its foreign policy power are unsuccessful, I know that Secretary Mattis has been directed to present to the President a set of options that will achieve the President's objective.
Right. Secretary Mattis has said that we're never out of diplomatic options. And let me get your response to this, because there are going to be some who make that recommendation that we've tried our diplomatic and economic sanctions, and Kim was absolutely unresponsive in this meeting with the president. Let me remind you that the Pentagon has stated that, quote, the only way to locate and destroy with complete certainty all components of North Korea's nuclear weapons programs would be through a ground invasion. And as you know, projections for a conventional war on the peninsula estimate that between 30,000 and 300,000 U.S. personnel could die in the first days of a conflict. You're a military man. You understand this. Is there any circumstance under which you would concur with John Bolton that with the exhaustion of economic sanctions from his perspective, that a ground invasion of North Korea would be necessary in order to rid that country of its nuclear weapons program?
Senator, I suppose I could hypothesize such situations, so I'll answer. Your question is, could I imagine one? Yes. Yes, Senator, I could. I mean, I suppose it's possible that we would get to the condition where, and I think there'd be wide consensus on this panel, where Kim Jong-un was directly threatening and we had information about his activities. Yes, I can imagine times when America would need to take a response that moved past diplomacy.
Yeah. Well, I would say to you, that the consequences of the United States initiating an attack against North Korea would be catastrophic.
Senator, I agree with that.
If we had not been attacked, and that's what concerns me about John Bolton, and I think the American people will want reassurances, from you, that you would not consider such an action, because ultimately he already has nuclear weapons, and it would be catastrophic almost immediately if we decided to make a first strike against him. So I don't feel comfortable with you not taking that off the table, but I'd like to move on to Saudi Arabia and the 1-2-3 agreement that's being negotiated with them. And again, I'm going to quote Mr. Bolton, that civil nuclear cooperation, or 1-2-3 agreements between the U.S. and other countries, must include the gold standard, a commitment to forego any uranium enrichment or spent fuel reprocessing, two technologies critical to the development of nuclear weapons. Do you believe that any agreement that we negotiate with Saudi Arabia should, in fact, have a gold standard?
Senator, yes. One of my critiques of the arrangement we reached with Iran was it was insufficiently close to such a standard.
So you support the gold standard?
I do. While I've not been part of the negotiation, Senator, I know that the State Department and the Department of Energy are working towards achieving that.
Right. So would you oppose any agreement that was less than the gold standard? That is, that ultimately permitted for uranium enrichment or plutonium reprocessing technology on the soil of Saudi Arabia?
Senator, I can't answer that for you. I can imagine that we got close, but not quite to the full definition of the gold standard. I don't want to hypothesize. But so the answer, I guess, is yes. I can imagine such a scenario.
Well, how do you think Iran would respond if we pulled out of the agreement with Iran while simultaneously agreeing to a deal where Saudi Arabia could receive plutonium reprocessing and uranium enrichment equipment? How do you think they would respond?
Senator, this is precisely my concern with the Iran agreement.
Right. So that's the question I'm asking you. What would be the response,
Senator,
Iran, if we were providing nuclear weapons material to the Saudi Arabians?
Yes, Senator, I think they would take it into account. And remember, when we're talking about nuclear weapons, we are most often talking about multiple components. We're talking about fissile material, the capacity to weaponize, and a delivery mechanism, often through missile systems. Today, Iran has the capacity to do.
Right, but
I'm just speaking to the challenge that the Saudi Arabians also see from our failure to negotiate a sound agreement with Iran.
This is going to be a very dangerous concoction. If we pull out of the Iran deal, give nuclear weapons materials to, or permit them to obtain nuclear weapons making materials, in their country. The juxtaposition of abandoning the Iran deal while simultaneously giving their arch rival, Saudi Arabia, a sweetheart deal is going to lead to a highly combustible condition in the Middle East that is avoidable if we reinforce the Iran deal, ensure that it's being complied with, while also maintaining a gold standard. Otherwise, what the Saudi Arabians are going to want is to be put on third base with a lead with nuclear weapons construction materials, and I think this administration will be making a terrible mistake if it negotiates a deal that allows the Saudi Arabians to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Markey.
Thank you for turning to Senator Isaacson. We have talked with Secretary Perry, and I couldn't agree more that we need to stress a gold standard. I will at the same time understand that, I mean, when you have given Iran the right to enrich, everybody in the region is going to want the right to enrich. So you've got your work cut out for you over the next period of time, and it is quite it's very difficult to tell an Arab nation that they cannot when we said that the Shia can. So, Senator Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your nomination. Best of luck to you, and we'll be here to support you in any way that we can. I certainly will. Let me start off by saying thank you to the Department, to the State Department, and to this administration on the Open Skies agreements, which you may or may not be familiar with, but if you aren't, they're essential for the aviation industry and for our country. And this administration and the Bureau of Economic Development of the State Department have done a great job of seeing to the Open Skies is enforced. I hope you'll commit when you get to the State Department, you'll continue that help and enforcement.
I will, Senator Isaacson. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Secondly, I think Ambassador Haley is gone, but let me say this anyway. I'm a big fan of Africa, and I've developed an affinity for Africa since I've been on this Committee of Foreign Relations. I've traveled there extensively, and I think it's the continent of the 21st century in many respects for our country and for everybody else. China's demonstrating they think it's important because they're spending a lot of money and building a lot of buildings and things of that nature. Strategically, with the Straits of Hormuz and many of the locations they have and what's been going on in the Persian Gulf, Africa is tremendously helpful. There are 1.5 million people there, 50 million alone, 150 million alone in Nigeria. Lots of opportunity economically, but it's important that we focus and help them build and develop and grow. Are you familiar with Millennium Challenge Corporation?
Yes, Senator. I'm familiar with it at some level.
Well, I'm a big fan. I think President Bush did a phenomenal job by establishing that program. It's sort of a partnership economically to help build infrastructure in those countries and have developed governing boards of the Millennium Challenge accounts that held the African countries who received the investment responsible for ending corruption, having better worker laws in their country, and being a partner with the United States to economically develop in their country. So I hope that as Secretary of State, when you have the chance, you'll focus on the Millennium Challenge Corporation and what they're doing, because it's part of that soft power that we have a capability to use to win a lot of friends and influence a lot of enemies. And the reason I use Ambassador Haley as an example, we from time to time need a lot of money, votes in the UN. The more friends we can make in countries in continents like Africa, the more votes we can influence to help us on big issues that we need in the United Nations. So I hope you'll focus on Africa when you have the chance and realize what the State Department has done. Lastly, this is kind of an editorial statement. My experience of the State Department has been that it has been in a blue funk for about 1.5 years. And one of the things, and I told you this when you came to my office, I thought there was a real need for a perk, for an adjustment, and for an attitude improvement in the State Department. I think you afford the opportunity to be that catalyst of the department. To your credit, your critics and your complimenters, or whatever that term should be, at the CIA give you high marks for bringing that agency back in enthusiasm and motivation and in mission. And I think your meetings with Mike that you referred to in your opening statement and your printed statement were exactly the seed for them, because they all of a sudden the employees had a chance to speak out to you, tell you what they thought needed to be done, and you had the chance in that environment to tell them what they could be as a partner with you to help that happen. And as I understand it, and I'm not shilling for anyone, but as I understand it, the attitudes of the State Department are the best that they've probably ever been, that the unity there is strong, and the understanding of the mission of the rank and file employees is great. So I want to challenge you to replicate where possible in the State Department that same energy and fire that you have at the CIA, because the State Department needs it desperately, and the State Department is our hope for peaceful settlements of difficult problems and putting our best foot forward early so we don't have to put our biggest foot forward late. And if you can do that and accomplish what you did at the CIA, at the State Department, you'll be a great secretary. Would you commit to trying to replicate what you've done there already? And please feel free to brag about yourself.
Senator, I will. I'll actually do just the opposite of that. What you described took place because of the talented officers, the expertise, the professionals at the Central Intelligence Agency. That is, I had enormous human capital with which to build a team. And I know the State Department's the same way. I know that the local employees, the civil service, the foreign service officers have that same esprit, that same desire for mission and to be relevant and to be important and to do the. If you sign up to be a foreign service officer, if you decide to devote your life to that, you have a special commitment. And my task, if I'm confirmed, will be to free them up to go do the great work that they signed up to do when they came aboard at the State Department. I'll work at that every day.
Well, you just demonstrated by giving the credit to the employees of the CIA exactly why you were such a popular director there, and I'm sure will continue at the State Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Pompeo. I do want to just say again, I appreciate you coming by and showing me the respect and deference to give me some time yesterday so we can talk in private.
You're most welcome.
I want to pick up on one of the themes we talked at length about, and that involves many of your past statements concerning Muslim Americans. And perhaps I just want to start with some of your language. In a speech you talked about folks who worshipped other gods and called it multiculturalism. You sort of mourn that we live in a country where that happens. Do you have any views that the Muslim faith or people who believe in worshiping quote unquote other gods, is that just something negative in our country?
No, Senator. You can look at my record. You don't have to take my word for it here today. My record is exquisite with respect to treating people of each and every faith with the dignity they deserve, to protect their right to practice their religion or no religion, for that matter, in the way that they want to. I've done that when I ran Thayer Aerospace and Century International.
And Mr., my time is limited, so if I can follow up.
But it's important because I've heard these critiques, and you raised it yesterday. I've worked closely with Muslim leaders, with Muslim countries. The CIA has saved countless, thousands of Muslim lives during my 15 months. This is at the core of who I am, Senator Booker, and I promise you that I will treat persons of each faith or no faith with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Your words right now are really encouraging. Words do matter. It's not just actions. In a nation of bigotry where you see too much bigotry and hatred, you and I both know words matter. So I do understand your actions that and I will stipulate to the actions you just said, but I really want to get to the bottom of people who are going to be reading your past statements and give you a chance to further explain them. And I would like to go back to what we talked about, you and I, about this idea, and I'm quoting you, that a special obligation falls on Muslims in regards to terrorist attacks in our country. And you said something very dramatic, and I know you know this. You said that people who are silent are complicit in those terrorist attacks. Do you think that Muslim Americans in this country who serve in our military, who serve in the State Department, their failure to speak up, are they complicit in terrorist attacks?
Senator, each and every human, not just Americans, each and every human being has an obligation to push back against this extremist use of violence from whatever faith.
So you don't create a special class of people in this country based upon their religion that have a special obligation, as you said, to condemn terrorist attacks?
No, Senator. Having said that, and I had a chance to talk about this yesterday. I'm not sure we ended up completely agreeing, but perhaps we did. I also do believe this firmly, that for certain places, for certain forms of violence, there are certain who are better positioned, folks who are more credible, more trustworthy, have a more shared experience. And so when it comes to making sure that we don't have terrorists brewing in places where Muslims congregate, there's a special place, right? They have an opportunity. It's more than a duty, more than a requirement. It's an opportunity, right, to be treated as, when someone from another faith says it can get characterized.
So if I can go on, because I have some more questions. So you think that Muslims in America who are in positions of leadership have a different category of obligation because of their religion? That's what I'm hearing you saying.
I don't see it. It's not an obligation. It's an opportunity.
Okay, so
Senator,
it's interesting because I would agree with you that silence in the face of injustice, we've seen this in the Holocaust, we've seen this in the Civil Rights Movement. I do agree with you that silence in the face of injustice lends strength to that injustice. I do have a problem, though, when you start dicing up American people and saying certain Americans, I don't care if it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Muslims that serve on my staff, that they're in positions of leadership that suddenly have a special obligation. I do believe, though, all of us, when this comes to violent actions or even violent words, have an obligation. And so I'm wondering, sir, do you know Frank Gaffney?
yes, I do.
And you've been on his show dozens of times.
I was on his show some, yes, Senator.
I have here over 20 times, and he has talked about Muslims should be, who abide by the adherence of their faith should be considered, should be tried for acts of sedition and should be prosecuted. Did you remain silent when you were on his show? Did you ever question, because I have a lot of his statements here. Did you remain silent on the, and he's, from my notes, at least you're a friend of his. Were you silent in your position of authority against these words that are violative of the American Constitution? Were you silent with him?
Senator, my record on this is unambiguous.
Sir, then if that's your response, you did not say anything to call out his remarks. What about Bridget Gabriel? Do you know her?
I do.
Someone who runs an organization that has been considered a hate group by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. Were you silent? Did you ever call her out on her remarks that are hateful or bigoted?
Senator, I've spoken to a number of groups, and I believe my record with respect to tolerance and the equal treatment of people is, I think
you never, yes or no, did you ever call her out?
Senator, I couldn't tell you. I don't recall each statement I've made over 54 years.
Okay, well, I believe the special obligation that you talk about for Americans to condemn things that are attacking our Constitution, our ideals, would obligate you in your own definition to speak out. When it comes to...
Senator, if I might, I have called out. We had a terrible fellow in Kansas named Fred Phelps.
Sir, I have a minute left.
And I called him out.
I have a minute left because I do want to give you a chance to speak about your comments on gay and lesbians. You said in a speech that mourning an America that endorses perversion and calls it an alternative lifestyle, those are your words, is being gay a perversion?
Senator, when I was a politician, I had a very clear view on whether it was appropriate for two same-sex persons to marry. I stand by that.
So you do not believe it's appropriate for two gay people to marry?
Senator, I continue to hold that view. It's the same view.
And so people in the State Department, I met some in Africa that are married under your leadership. You do not believe that that should be allowed?
Senator, I believe it's the case. We have married gay couples at the CIA. You should know I treated them with the exact same set of rights.
Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion? Yes or no?
Senator,
yes or no, sir. Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion? Because that's what you said here in one of your speeches. Yes or no? Do you believe gay sex is a perversion?
Senator, I'm going to give you the same answer I just gave you previously. My respect for every individual, regardless of their sexual orientation, is the same.
So I will conclude by saying,
if I'm confirmed.
I will conclude by saying, sir, you're going to be Secretary of State of the United States at a time that we have an increase in hate speech and hate actions against Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, Indian Americans. Hate acts are on the increase in our nation. You're going to be representing this country and their values abroad in nations where gay individuals are under untold persecution, untold violence. Your views do matter. You're going to be dealing with Muslim states and on Muslim issues. And I do not necessarily concur that you are put forward the values of our nation when you can't even, when you believe that there are people in our country that are perverse, and where you think that you create different categories of Americans and their obligations when it comes to condemning violence. So I'll have another round, but thank you.
Thank you. Senator Portman. Senator Paul, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony, and thanks for going through this grueling enterprise and your willingness to serve the country. You discussed with Senator Kaine a little bit about whether or not the president has the authority to bomb Assad's forces or installations in Syria, and you mentioned historically, well, we've done it in the past. I don't think that's a complete enough answer. I mean, my question would be, do you think it's constitutional? Does the president have the constitutional authority to bomb Assad's forces? Does he have the authority, absent congressional action, to bomb Assad's forces or installations?
Senator, as I think I said to Senator Kaine, I'm happy to repeat my view on this. Those decisions are weighty. Every place we can, we should work alongside Congress to get that. But yes, I believe the president has the domestic authority to do that. I don't think that has been disputed by Republicans or Democrats throughout an extended period of time.
Actually, it's disputed mostly by our founding fathers, who believe they gave that authority to Congress, and actually they're uniformly opposed to the executive branch having that power. In fact, Madison wrote very specifically, he said, the executive branch is the branch most prone to war, therefore we have, with studied care, vested that authority in the legislature. So the fact that we have in the past done this doesn't make it constitutional, and I would say that I take objection to the idea that the president can go to war when he wants, where he wants. With regard to Afghanistan, some have argued that it's time to get out of Afghanistan. What do you think?
Senator, I think the course of action that President Trump has taken there is the right one. It is humble in its mission. It understands that we've been there an awfully long time. It has an objective of leaving, but is not prepared to leave until such time as we can put America in a position where we can greatly diminish the threat to our homeland from terrorism that may emanate from there. And with an effort alongside that, which will be required to achieve that first objective, to create, I want to be humble, more stability in Afghanistan.
Well, actually, the president has been very specific at times on this, and he said it is time to get out of Afghanistan. We are building roads and bridges and schools for people that hate us. It is not in our national interest. That's a direct quote. So the president said it was time to get out. It sounds like you say it's time to stay. Is that a difference in opinion? Some here worry that you're going to be too much in agreement with the president. I actually worry you're going to be too much in disagreement with the president. One of the things I have liked about the president is he says it is time to come home. Let's declare victory and come home. But it sounds to me like you were saying we need to stay.
Senator, sounds like I have a Goldilocks problem. Too close, too far. Different porridge for each. Senator, the president also said in the summer at Fort Myer that he was committed to the mission that I outlined there. That's consistent with what Secretary of State has been trying to do diplomatically. It's consistent with what Secretary Mattis has been trying to do by supporting Afghan forces in the country. I believe, and I share the president's view, that we have a continued role there. And while I want to get out in the same way you do, I have friends who are serving there. I've had friends, as I know you would, who have been injured. We're not at a place yet where it's appropriate to do.
Here's the problem is, are we ever going to be at that place? I mean, so you've got people.
All right, folks, we are getting ready for our Fox 10 Extra show in about 2 minutes, so stay right here with us. We'll have top stories of the day in just a moment. And welcome, everybody, here to News and Now on this Thursday, but we really like to call it Friday Eve here on News Now as we get you caught up on all the top headlines and stories of the day, not only here in Arizona, but across the country right here on News Now. And let's show you the markets right now as they are in the green right here, up 363 points. We'll continue to take a look at that throughout the show here on Fox 10 Extra and News and Now.
That's nice to see right there, Big Mike. All up right. 350, so by the end of the day, it'll be probably down 350, huh?
Yeah, well, you just never know in the final hour of trading.
Oh, my goodness.
What's going to happen. Because it just seems within that final hour, you don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to sell off, or are they going to continue to buy up here? But thank you so much here for joining us. I'm Mike Page alongside Ron Hoon as we get you caught up. Top stories here of the day. In a little bit, we're expecting President Trump live at the Rose Garden.
Okay, so I'm going to be really curious. He's going to be talking about the whole tax cut package.
Yes.
And there's been some talk coming out of D.C. over the last 24 hours that he's feeling a little bit of buyer's remorse on the amount of spending that had to be shoved into it in order to get the tax cuts in the first place, new worries about exploding the deficit, etc. So what exactly will he talk about? Is he simply going to trumpet the advantages of the tax cuts, or will he start to push for a little bit of a scale back in some of the spending? It'll be interesting to see what direction this goes.
Yeah, it will be, and it'll be interesting to watch the markets at the same time. As he's talking to see how that response is there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll keep an eye on that one here for you. But I want to show you, this is a Fox exclusive that Fox News had with President Trump's new limo that should be coming to him by this summer. We're getting our first glimpse of it. This is on foxnews.com. Take a look at this. What do you think of this, Ron?
Wow, man.
This is not a normal looking limo.
Yeah, I know. We were talking about it earlier. I had just glanced at the picture, and it sort of felt like it had almost like a camouflage type feel. But the more I look at it now, it looks like one of those gigantic QR codes.
There you go. That's a perfect way to look at that. You're right. Can you just scan that and get to know what the president is up to for his schedule? I don't know.
Oh, it's crazy.
So this is on foxnews.com, everybody. You can take a look at it. But yeah, here's a better look right there. That just looks bizarre.
It does. I'm not a huge fan, but who knows? It is a prototype, so the thing is, it's nice to have a vehicle that looks like it's still got a little bit of elegance to it. Like the jet black, shiny limo type look. I mean, this looks like, I don't know, looks like something.
This looks like it came out of the factory and they couldn't decide which paint color, so they put two on it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, come on. Yeah, you're right though. There is nothing like the jet black look. It just looks pristine. It looks polished. This looks like we're all over the place here.
Well, maybe they're actually just trying to add a whole element of mystery to it.
That's true.
And maybe it's like some sort of weird wrap that got put around it, and in the end they'll go with more of the traditional look. Who knows?
Yeah, who really knows there?
But probably won't be a self-driver.
No.
I mean, even though I have never really 100% understood that whole trend of the push to self-driving cars, the push. And then, of course, we had that horrible accident out here in the valley, and it raised some questions. And that, by the way, wasn't the first time. There'd been a real big problem with self-driving technology. So if you ask me, I wish these automakers, for the most part, would simply be trying to move toward electric.
Yeah, right.
Cut the emissions, cut this crazy swings in gas prices. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Electricity is just sort of what you pay for.
Yeah, so we'll see there. And other top stories, though, everybody's really wondering, okay, is there going to be some Syria action?
Yeah.
We're waiting to see yesterday for the White House news briefing.
Are we going to get serious about Syria?
Yeah, right.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, here's what I think is going on.
Yeah, tell me.
I think that they want to make absolutely sure that there really was, A, a chemical attack, and B, that Assad was behind it, before they either launch missiles or, which was what happened last time. It was the launching of some missiles from a ship off the coast. You know, but this time there's been some discussion about fighter planes, you know, to take that fight to the next level. But we also had a report this morning that adds a new element of danger to it, frankly, if you ask me, and that is that the Syrians, now with enough advance warning, are moving a lot of their equipment and personnel onto bases where it is known that Russians are and operate. You know, so then what's the situation?
Right.
I mean, are we going to fire missiles into locations where we know Russians are?
Very dicey, huh?
Very dicey indeed. So we shall see what happens there. But I think what's going on, trying to read the tea leaves here with some of the remarks that General Mattis made in that meeting last night, is I think they're just trying to get 100% confirmation that what they believe happened really did happen before they take strong military action.
Yes. So we'll wait and see what comes of that. Take you out to Capitol Hill right now. You see Mike Pompeo there, the confirmation hearing going on right now as he is the nominee for Secretary of State. That's happening right now. We'll check in a little bit later with that. But this is a big confirmation hearing.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Long ago in our country's history, whoever was Secretary of State was pretty much the almost automatic shoo-in to be the next president of the United States. That trend has stopped in more recent times with the way campaigns go. But, I mean, let's face it, this is about as powerful a position as you can have in the United States government and not be president. I mean, you could clearly make the argument that it is more powerful by far than even vice president.
Right, yeah, because you are really on the world stage there when it comes to greeting diplomats and everything.
And especially in the time frame and the era that we live, where tensions with Russia, you know, you hear the president saying it's worse now than it was even during the Cold War. There's a lot of tension there. There are hot spots around the world that we really have to pay attention to, continuing in the Middle East, that kind of thing. And just global competition, you know, because we're number one. And when you're number one, people are aiming for you.
Yeah.
So
you got that bullseye.
Yeah, it really is. It's going to be a key position now. I've been watching, I know you have too. The hearings actually started about 3 hours ago. He's handling it all really quite well.
He is, and no breaks yet.
And no breaks.
Yeah, right.
Man, you would not want to drink a big gulp.
No.
I mean, I don't know about you, Big Mike, but do you have a cup of coffee to start your day? What do you do?
Yeah, I had a coffee today. Yeah.
So I'm like Mountain Dew with a little Crystal Light sprinkled in, man. That gives you the energy boost you need. But the thing about it is, I like to drink a big gulp size. I like to drink a 44-ouncer, like a lot of folks do here in the desert.
Right.
That would be difficult to go 3 hours without, quote, taking a break.
Yeah, right. You'd be really trying
squirming.
to get through those questions.
I don't want to even comment on that. Next question.
Yeah,
exactly.
That would not look good on some of those questions, depending on who it came from, too.
Yeah, right.
So we'll keep an eye on that and show that to you a little bit later. I want to show everybody this one. This is a new website that the RNC just launched, the Republican National Committee there. Take a look at what they just launched here. It's Lion Comey. This is the website. It's lioncomey.com, and they did this in response, ahead of Comey's book tour that is going to be coming up here.
Yeah. So I don't have confidence in him any longer, says Chuck Schumer. Maxine Waters, he has no credibility. Pelosi, maybe he's not right in the job.
Right.
You know, a lot of this is badly overstepped his bounds, says Hillary Clinton.
So
a lot of this is having to do with, more in the days leading up to and right after the election. Yeah. And at that point, Democrats were really unhappy with him just because of the whole Hillary Clinton mess.
Sure.
And so, it's just interesting. I mean, he's now doing the book tour, and he's got to sell books. But the change of tone from his gracious exit, where, remember, he had sent that memo out to fellow staffers at the FBI, and he said in it basically, I've long felt that the president could fire you, that you serve at the pleasure of the president, and he could fire you for any reason or no reason at all. And we go from that, that many months ago now, about a year ago, to now he's calling the President of the United States a mob boss.
I saw that. That was in it seems like that's going to be part of a interview with ABC network there.
Right. And maybe that's in the book, maybe he digs into it a lot more, and maybe, I think when people write these tell-all books coming out of high-profile positions in D.C., I'm sure they are encouraged to put the dirty laundry out there.
Right.
But, when you come forward with a position like that, and you've already admitted to being a leaker, remember he did that in his sworn testimony before Congress, I called a friend of mine who knew how to get this information out there, so it makes it look like he's specifically kind of has it in. For Trump. I mean, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, no doubt about it. But he is obviously very tight and very close friends with Robert Mueller. There are people on the Republican side who say it's time for a handful of people who say it's time for the president to take action either against Rosenstein or Mueller. But then the interview last night, which to me was pretty groundbreaking on Tucker Carlson's show. He had a top lawyer and law professor from George Washington University on his show last night. And he asked him, he said to him, this law professor's name is Jonathan Turley. And Tucker says, because remember how this whole investigation started. We've got to make sure that our election system remains pristine and away from influence that the Russians are going to try to meddle with that lofty goal. And it just looks like and feels like we're going down the road of the porn star angle. Right?
Sure.
So with all of that going on, you've got some people saying that the president should fire Mueller. A lot of others saying no, absolutely don't do it. It would backfire on you. But anyhow, you had this law professor last night on Tucker Carlson. Tucker says, how did we get from Russia collusion to this porn star? How did we get there? And the thing about it that is so fascinating that people I don't think had thought through and maybe just this morning are waking up to is this. That decision to take the, I guess you could say the FBI's desire to get into Trump's office with questions about attorney-client privilege and do the raid on his information and apparently try to get after additional details on the Access Hollywood tape. With all of that going on, if the president were to fire Mueller, this is the law professor's point, when the decision was made by apparently Rod Rosenstein to hand this off to the DA's office, local DA in New York, that has nothing to do with Robert Mueller now. So what Rosenstein did was twofold. A, he kept Mueller focused in the Russia area and kind of put blinders up on both sides. But at the same time, by handing this off to something that's completely outside of Mueller's jurisdiction, President could fire Mueller in 5 minutes, and that would not stop this new investigation of Michael Cohen, payments to people leading up to the election, etc.
Sure.
So now that angle has been opened up and isn't directly being handled by Mueller, President could be in some he could be in some jeopardy.
That's true. That's true. But I wonder if his advisors are saying, "Look, Mr. President, don't do anything with Mueller." From this vantage point, it doesn't look like they have anything right now because they started with Russia, and that seemed to go nowhere, and then they go the porn star angle.
Yes, right. And it's quite possible that with the porn star angle that they are going more after who knows what types of interviews or information Michael Cohen, the attorney, longtime friend and attorney of the president, what type of information he's already said to them, but they could, whether they're directly going after the president with all of this or whether they're going after Cohen for either potentially making false statements or trying to cover his tracks in some of these payments, etc.
Right.
You just don't know exactly where they are going with it. And it would be a panic move. For the president to either fire Mueller or do any of these others, take any of these other steps.
And at this time that we're speaking, the Democrats are trying to come up with a bill already that would prevent President Trump from firing Mueller and Rod Rosenstein.
Correct. Which Mitch McConnell says, I don't see the need for it. Paul Ryan says, I've been given assurances this is not going to happen. But then now you got Paul Ryan. Now all of a sudden people realize he's a lame duck. There are already some members of Congress who say, you know what? Paul, we like you, but move on.
Yeah, right.
We got to select a new leader because we got these huge elections coming up in about 6 months' time.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot of growing speculation, too, that he's hanging it up ahead of November, where it looks like Democrats might go on a little run there and overtake the House. Yeah. And wouldn't he be out of Speaker anyway?
That's correct. Then it would go back, it would revert back to Nancy Pelosi unless Democrats in their own way decide to, let's say they get back into power, then it's a decision. Pelosi would clearly want to be Speaker. She's had that position in the past. Yeah. But you would obviously, I think you probably would have 2 or 3 other newer, fresher names if the party wanted to, give a fresh look to the voters with an eye toward 2020.
There we go. All interesting stuff in the world of politics, right? It just seems like every day, really every hour, it seems like there's a new angle, there's a new headline. So we'll try to keep up with it. But thanks so much, Ron, for top headlines here of the day. And when we come back, coming up soon, we're going to go live to the New York Stock Exchange to talk about how do we stay green into the weekend. More news now coming up next. All right, everybody, welcome back here to News Now as we take a live look at the U.S. Capitol on this Thursday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here, continuing on with News Now as we bring you the top stories of the day from around the country and right here in Arizona. Hope everyone is having a great Thursday, and hopefully everyone's has their eyes on the weekend and has some good plans as we are getting very, very close to that weekend. So hope everyone has some great plans there. All right, we have some more top stories here to bring you. We're going to take you out to the White House, where just moments ago, President Trump wrapped up a meeting with some of the governors across our country. Let's take a listen here. And we're also about 20 minutes away from President Trump live at the Rose Garden at the White House. So we'll have that for you in full right here on News Now as well. But let's show you just moments ago, President Trump with the governors across the country.
So this is a group I like very much. We're here to discuss agriculture, very important. These are great people, great Americans, great patriots. And they've been treated very badly for a long time. And if you look at the farmer, it's been unfortunately over a 12-year period trending downward, very much trending downward. So we're changing things with respect to trade and trade with other countries. A lot of times the farmers they know what they have. but it'll be very good when we get it all finished. It'll be great. You know, people are a little bit concerned going into that wild blue yonder, or in our case, the wild red yonder. But I will say that the farmers are going to be, they're going to do fantastically well. But they have been trending downward for a long period of time, and we're not going to have that. A lot of it's because of bad trade deals. So I'm pleased to be joined by several of our nation's governors, very distinguished governors, and members of Congress to talk about trade and agriculture. As you know, the recent investigation led by U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer, who's with us today also, identified a pattern of chronic Chinese trading abuses, including theft of intellectual property and trade secrets and forced technology transfers, which has cost this country hundreds of billions of dollars, and also the targeting of American technology. It's cost us untold hundreds of billions of dollars over the years. Larry Kudlow's here, and he's shaking his head approvingly, meaning of what I'm saying. Yes, sir. But disapprovingly of what they've done. Yes, sir. As you are all aware, China has consistently treated the United States agriculture unfairly. I was very proud of something I did at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I had President Xi, who's a friend of mine, who's a very, very good man. And I don't blame China. I blame our representatives, that our people over the past, our presidents and negotiators and trade representatives, that they allowed this to happen. But during a very brief conversation, I said, President, the United States, we want to sell beef again to China. Now, they hadn't sold it in, what, 14 years or something. And he looked at me and he said, say it again. I said, we want to sell beef. That's a big industry in China. And he said, we will sell beef in China. And we did other things too. But the one that really is the most interesting for the people at this table is beef. And I think, Governor, that made a big impact, and they're selling a lot of beef in China. That hadn't been for 14, 15 years. They were not allowed to sell beef in China. So we have the kind of a relationship that I think is going to be very aggressively sustained. Yesterday, as you know, President Xi made a very good speech, and he said he's going to open up China. He's going to open it up, take down a lot of the trade barriers, maybe all of them, but take down a lot of trade barriers. And he's going to get rid of a lot of the taxes or tariffs that they charge. Because right now, if you have, and I use this example because it's so easy, if we sell a car into China, number one, they won't take the car. And number two, if they did take the car, it's 25% tariff. Whereas we have no barrier, and when they sell a car into us, it's 2.5%. So they have barriers, but when they don't have barriers, it's 25% versus 2.5%. That's not a good way to make money. Chuck will tell you that. So we're straightening that out. We want to be reciprocal. So if they charge 25, we charge 25. If they charge 2.5, we charge 2.5. And maybe what happens is we both charge nothing. Because I know we'd all like that. I think Ben would like that better than anybody. Okay, that's simpler than 25. Let's save all the transfer of funds, right? So that's what we want. We want more trade. We want no barriers. But the only way you can knock it down, you can't just go in. For 25 years, presidents have been trying to negotiate, and they've been very unsuccessful. Because they'd meet and they'd say, can we talk? And the Chinese would say, yes, we can. And that's what they do. They talk for 4 years. Then they talk for another 4 years. And that would be the end of that. Nothing would happen. So nothing would happen. So we're doing a job there. NAFTA. We're renegotiating NAFTA. It's coming along great. I have no time. You know, I keep reading from the fake news media that we're pushing it. I'm not pushing it. I don't care. You're laughing. That's good, John. Well, see, Fox can smile because, you know, you do a very beautiful job. But I keep hearing how we're pushing NAFTA. We want it done. There's no timeline. There's no timeline. Now, in the meantime, nobody's moving into Mexico because as long as NAFTA's in flux. No company is going to spend $1 billion to build an automobile plant. So I say this, I told it to the Mexicans, we can negotiate forever. Because as long as we have this negotiation going, nobody's going to build billion-dollar plants in Mexico, which is what they've been doing a lot. They have taken our auto industry by the throat. And so many jobs have been lost, so many massive plants have been built in Mexico. Top-of-the-line stuff. But that's not happening now, and they're coming back. Chrysler's moved back. A lot of them have moved back. And same thing with agriculture, which is going to be our predominant discussion today. So agriculture is okay with NAFTA. Not great. We're going to make it great. We're going to make it great. And we're getting pretty close to a deal. It could be 3 or 4 weeks. It could be 2 months. It could be 5 months. I don't care. So, you know, the narrative of I'm pushing for a deal. I never push for a deal. I don't care. In fact, if everybody in this room closed their ears, I'd say I'd rather terminate NAFTA and make a brand new deal, but I'm not going to do that because I want everyone to be happy in this room, okay? We'll see how it goes. But we're going to make a fair NAFTA deal, much better than it is right now. NAFTA has cost this country hundreds of billions of dollars. It has been a disaster. We've lost 50,000 factories, millions of jobs. NAFTA has been a disaster. So we're going to either come up with a great NAFTA deal and a fair one for this country, or we're going to just do something else, and agriculture will be taken care of 100%. So we're going to have a discussion today, and we're going to talk about agriculture as it relates to trade primarily. Again, we're doing really well with China. I think we're having some great discussions. We'll see what happens. We put a $50 billion tariff on, then we put a $100 billion tariff on. And you know, at a certain point, they run out of bullets. Remember what I said. When you're 500 billion down, you can't lose a trade war. And I won't call it a trade war, because it's really a trade negotiation. But nobody ever negotiated from our side. Nobody ever did anything. All they did is talk. And in the meantime, we helped rebuild China because they took so much money, bridges and airports and military and everything. They took so much, hundreds of billions of dollars out of our country. So now we're really negotiating, and I think they're going to treat us very fairly. I think they want to. And again, I don't blame my friend, President Xi. I blame our representatives for years that didn't do a damn thing, and they allowed it to happen. I wish we could do what they did, because that would make everybody at this table very happy. So perhaps we're in the process of doing it. The other thing is, if you look at the European Union, we're talking to them. I don't know if you realize it, but they have virtual barriers against even agriculture from going in. So they sell us their Mercedes-Benzes, and they sell us their BMWs, and they sell all the different things, and we have no barriers whatsoever. Hello, Pete. Good job you're doing, Pete. Nebraska, folks, doing a good job. He never liked me until we met. Right? He was a never-Trumper. And his family.
My brother Todd.
And then I flew to Nebraska, a state I love. I made a speech, and he liked me. And from then on, he called his brother. He said, "Trump's good. Let's be friends." And we became.
Remember that speech, Mr. President? You vowed to open up the Chinese market to our U.S. beef, and you delivered on that promise.
Right? Did I deliver? I did that quickly.
Yeah.
In one conversation. So good to see you, Pete. So. We are opening up the European Union, or we're not going to, be very nice about it. The European Union will lose $151 billion this year. We lose with almost everybody. We lose with Canada, we lose with Mexico, we lose with the European Union, we lose with China, Vietnam. I mean, no matter where you go. It's very rare that our country has a surplus. But we're changing it. And as Ben said, we want to have trade, and we want to have barriers taken down, because the barriers in many cases are far worse than the tariffs. I mean, the tariffs can be bad, but the barriers are very bad. So the European Union makes it very hard for agricultural products because their farmers don't want you there. The farmers say, we don't want the American farmers. But that's not fair, because we take all of their stuff. A lot of cars and a lot of other things. So they're going to have to take down the barriers, because we can't have it. When you think of the European Union, you think so friendly, so nice. They're very brutal to us in terms of trade. So we're talking about that too. In the end, the farmers are going to be, I think, the biggest beneficiary from all of what's happening. There are great people. We love our farmers. They were so good to me during the election. That whole, much more than center of the country. It's a big group of people, Joni, right? But Sonny Perdue came and he said, look at this, and he held up a map, and the whole thing is red, and those are those farmers, and we love those farmers, right? We're going to take care of the farmers. They haven't been taken care of. I mean, you just take a look at European Union. They virtually can't do business. Take a look at China. Take a look at so many other places. So we are going to finish off these trade deals. I'm going to ask Sonny, the Secretary of Agriculture, to say a couple of words. I might ask Bob Lighthizer to say a couple of words, and maybe Larry Kudlow, and then we will get on with our meeting, and we'll ask the media to head out of the room. Sonny?
Mr. President, the people in this room, both in Congress and governors, represent some of the best people in America, and that is those people that you've used a word that I like to use about them. They're patriots first. They're Americans first. They bring the hard-working working ethics of the American spirit from their fields and farms and ranches across this country, and they support you. They understand what you're trying to do, and calling the question, having the courage to call the question against people who've been cheating, both China and EU. The barriers that you described actually punish American farmers more than a lot of other industries, because the American farmer and rancher has been so productive. So they're with you in that effort. Obviously, from their livelihood perspective, we can understand their anxieties, and that's what these people hear about on an ongoing basis. But I've been out last week on the road assuring them what you told me, is that you are going to take care of the American farmer. You don't expect them to be the only soldiers in this battle. And first of all, I think your point of what President Xi said over the weekend, I don't think we're in a battle yet. I think we have set the stage for a balanced negotiation that can happen, and that's what all of us are hoping and praying for, that we get a good, sound, fair, balanced negotiation with all of these countries, and we applaud your leadership and courage in calling that question.
Well, that's why I really call the farmers patriots, because they know what I'm doing. They had a group of 10 on in one of the shows over the weekend, and they were farmers. And do you agree what the president's doing with China? And they all agreed. They all said, look, we may have to take a little bit of a hit. I don't even think they will. But in the end, the country's going to be much stronger. Our country is going to be much stronger. But more importantly, they're going to be everything's going to be better. Just everything's going to be better. And one of them said, you know, most importantly, the country's going to be much stronger, but we're going to make much more money. They're going to be doing much better. And, you know, as an example, I'm working with Chuck Grassley and with Joni and with Deb and with all of us, right? We're all working together. And we're working on the ethanol. And it's really working out. I think it's going to really work out. People have been talking about this for years. And we think we're going to do something, I will say early, and this is no guarantee, but we're going to raise it up to 15%, which makes a lot of people happy. We're going to go to 12 months, which makes a lot of farmers very happy, because we go from 8 months to 12 months. That's a big difference. It was always unnecessary and ridiculous. So we're going to work out something during the transition period, which is not easy, very complicated, because we have to take care of our refineries. We have to take care of a lot of other people. But we're working on transition now, because there'll be a 2-year period of time that we have a little bit of complexity while things are happening, while things are being built. But we're going to be going probably to 15, and we're going to be going to a 12-month period. So I think that's going to be great. Look at that big smile. Boy, all of a sudden there's a lot of smiles. And you know what? It's going to solve a problem. And we're going to be helping also. We're going to be also helping the refineries. So the refineries are going to be able to do much better, because right now there are a lot of them that are not doing well. So we have to help the refineries. So we're very close to getting that done, and we've worked hard on that, Joni, I think, but it's coming along very nicely. Could I ask Bob Lighthizer to say a few words, please?
Sure, Mr. President. I would say, first of all, get into details about things in the private session, as you asked. Just preliminarily, one, I talked to a lot of people around this room a lot. Everybody, I hope you all realize that I'm available to talk. I know this is in-time information, and consulting is important. And I haven't talked to all of you, but most of you I talked to a fair amount. So I want you to know that I'm welcome to do that. I'm happy to do it.
He's working about 23 hours a day, and he sleeps for 1. Look at him. I mean, is this guy? That's all right. That's all right.
Well,
You're only kidding. You're looking good. Go
I
ahead.
don't look that bad, all right? So the second thing is we tend to think a lot about agriculture is always on the defensive and all these things. The fact is you can't really find a serious market where we couldn't do better in agriculture. China, of course, we talk about the sales there, but they're a fraction of what they should be, literally. Moving down quickly, of course, we've made enormous progress. People are aware of that, I feel.
All right, for everybody here on Fox10Phoenix.com, we are in a break right now. We're going to do a mic check with Nicole Petalides live from New York City. Nicole, can you hear me here? We're just doing a mic check.
Oh, yes. Hi. How are you? Good afternoon. Is it morning there? Wait, it's morning there, right?
Yeah, it's still morning. Still morning there.
Right? We're just doing mic checks now, right?
Okay. Yeah, just mic checks. Just about 90 seconds away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Nicole, 45 seconds to go, 45 seconds out. And welcome back here to News Now as we take a live look at the Dow Jones right now up in the green, 280 points right now. And we are going to go live to the New York Stock Exchange to give us some better insight right now is Fox Business's very own Nicole Petalides live on the floor. Nicole, how are you doing today?
Mike, good afternoon. Doing pretty great. I love to see the green on the screen when the Dow's up 281 points right now. That always feels great because people have obviously their stocks in their 401ks and IRAs. And over the last 52 weeks, we've had a great run. The Dow over the last 52 weeks is up about 17%. The last few weeks have been very volatile. I mean, we've seen obviously a lot of headline-driven market action, the trade tariffs, China, trade wars, the fears, and then the conciliatory tone between our two presidents between here and China. And then things came back only to have the headlines drive us once again, concerns about Syria, Russia, and missiles, and then that weighed on markets. And now we're waiting for tomorrow. Well, today we'll hear a little bit about tax cuts from our president, and then tomorrow the bank earnings. So we've had a lot of back and forth action, but we are higher for the week. Mike.
There you go, Nicole. And we're about 15 minutes away from President Trump speaking live outside of the Rose Garden for those tax cuts. What are investors going to be listening into ahead of the speech and
I mean, I think big picture, we're expecting much of the same. We know that Donald Trump likes to reiterate some points, and that is, of course, that so many Americans will be benefiting individually from these tax cuts. I mean, I've heard different stats, but about more than 80% of Americans in some way, shape, or form do benefit from the tax cuts. And then you have the corporate tax rate, the favorable corporate tax rate, which then brings jobs. So we're likely to hear some of that rhetoric that he's working on having a better tax rate for corporations so that they can bring the jobs or keep the jobs right here at home. The difference is the tax cuts for corporations are permanent. The tax cuts for the individuals, not. Those are actually due to expire for families in 2026. So we'll see how he breaks that down. But big picture, likely to hear how it's been beneficial to Americans, and we shouldn't even call it Trump's tax cut or the Republicans' tax cut. I mean, this is a tax cut for all Americans, as we're all true patriots.
There we go. This is very well said. Thank you so much, Nicole Petalides, there live on the floor, and we love a green day, so thanks so much for talking to us today.
Me too.
Yeah, gotta love a green. All right, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks again to Nicole Petalides there live on the New York Stock Exchange as markets continue to rise. They're up 280 points, and we are just about 5 minutes away from President Trump talking about those tax cuts like Nicole was talking about, so we'll continue to wait there for the president. More News Now. Hey, it's coming up next here on News Now. And welcome back, everyone, here live to News Now as we take a live look at downtown Phoenix on this Thursday. We're expecting about a high of 81 degrees, partly cloudy, but the big story for the weather here in Arizona today is in a little bit coming up maybe past 11 into the afternoon hours. It could get very gusty in the valleys, anywhere temps, any wind gusts from 30 to 40 miles per hour. And our very own Carmen Blackwell a little bit earlier today on AZAM previewed those wind gusts and blowing threats that could happen. Take a look.
Good morning, Troy. That's right. Those strong winds are expected to reach anywhere between 25 to 30 miles per hour in some parts of northern Arizona, though, possibly up to 40 miles per hour. Now, that could be a huge risk for those drivers that are planning to hit the highway at any point today. So here with me, we're inside the ADOT Traffic Operations Center speaking with the experts, well, besides Andrea herself, about the traffic. This morning, I have Garen with me. So we're actually looking at tons of monitors here. Tell me what you guys do around the clock.
That's right. We're monitoring conditions on the highways across the state 24 hours a day, every corner of the state. And today, really what we're looking at are the winds and the potential for blowing dust that will make for hazardous driving conditions, potentially even shut down some highways at times.
Okay, that's right. And so you're looking at all of these monitors here. You guys are tracking this nonstop. You have a PIO that's 24 hours here. You're constantly tweeting out those traffic alerts that are extremely helpful for drivers on the road. So tell tell me what's the biggest scare. What should somebody do if they feel those winds start to pick up and the dust starts to clear on the road?
Well, if you see it, the best thing you can do is never drive into a dust storm. But if the visibility suddenly drops because those winds kick up, you want to get off the road as quickly as possible. Take your foot off the brake, turn your engine off, and turn your lights off and wait it out. Usually the worst of that storm will pass in just a few minutes and you're able to get going again.
Yeah, you said usually around this time of year, during the spring, is usually when the winds get extremely high. And then possibly in the later parts, towards the summer, is when the heat kicks up, and then it's kind of like the dust storm time. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll see some dust now, and then of course we all know about the monsoons and the haboobs blowing in and just bringing visibility to zero in an instant. We could have conditions very much like that today in northern Arizona, and then also on I-10 from Phoenix to Tucson, and then again from Tucson over to New Mexico.
So is the best option for drivers today just to all around delay travel until tomorrow, or should they wait till later on this evening?
Drivers really may want to consider delaying travel because we're looking at the highest winds till probably about 7 p.m. in many parts of the state. And again, those conditions could worsen in an instant. So if you are on the road, be prepared to pull off the road and wait it out. That could take a while. And really think about delaying travel if possible into the evening or into tomorrow.
All right, Garen, thank you so much. And again, if you are traveling at any point today, especially those of you that are up north in Arizona, just please delay travel until tomorrow. It's not worth it. Or just pull on the side of the road if you start to feel those winds pick up or even see some dust coming your way. Troy, back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you so much there, Carmen. That was a little bit earlier today on AZAM. We'll continue to take a look at our weather here in the Valley, but now you're taking a live look at the White House right now at the Rose Garden, where we are just moments away from President Trump stepping up to the podium to talk about tax cuts for the American workers here. So we'll continue to wait for that. You can see in the very front row, Vice President Mike Pence is already sitting down. So this should be happening pretty soon right here on News Now. As soon as we see the president walk up to that podium, we'll bring it to you right here on News Now. But in the meantime, while we do wait for the president to come outside there, we are going to show you just a little bit ago some House Democrats coming together to try to put a bill together to stop President Trump from possibly firing Robert Mueller in that special investigation, special counsel that is going on right now. Let's listen to a little bit of that while I do continue to wait for President Trump and to get to the podium outside. Let's listen to the House Democrats right now.
The author of the other precursor bill, Steve Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is an extremely important occurrence that the Senate has decided to try to bring the two bills together and to move forward, and that as a House Judiciary Committee, we have joined them in introducing this legislation. There is nothing more important right now than protecting our democracy and protecting the rule of law, which is what America stands for. And we have the great opportunity to go overseas and represent our country. What people tell us on a regular basis is what they admire about America most is the rule of law. They like the idea that we have a judiciary system and that no man is above the law. Robert Mueller is our line between the loss of America's most respected and most important structure, the rule of law, and an authoritarian government that makes us more like Hungary, Russia, Egypt, Turkey, China. That's not why we ran for office. That's not why we were proud to be elected. That's not what we do when we represent our people. It should be bipartisan, and Walter Jones has joined us, but he is the Gary Cooper of the Republican Congress. He is a man who stands alone. And it's sad that he stands alone because there's nothing wrong with due process and an opportunity to be judged on your merits and to be only fired for cause when you're standing up to see if a Russian government, a foreign government colluded or interfered with our free elections and whether there were other illegalities that might have taken place. So I'm happy this is moving forward. I think it's the most important bill that we have, and I think that it's just an American bill. And if you want to make America great, keep America great, you protect the rule of law and see that no man, no woman is above the law. Thank you.
I just have one correction here. Mr. Jones is not a sponsor.
Gary Cooper got shot.
We'll now hear from Zoloff in California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a lot of dust has been in the air among some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle what's happened so far. I think it's worth quickly recapping what we know to be true. Mr. Mueller, who was authorized to do an investigation, apparently came across some information that he thought was significant, but not within the scope of his investigation. And so going to, as the regulations provide, Mr. Rosenstein, who was acting in the supervisory role, they properly referred it to the U.S. attorney that had jurisdiction in the Southern District of New York. Now, contrary to what the president said, no one broke in to Michael Cohen's office. A warrant was executed. Now, how do you get a warrant? You go before a judge and a partial magistrate, and you have to show probable cause that a crime has been committed, and in the case of an attorney, that there's a likelihood that the evidence will be compromised or destroyed if the warrant is not issued. And in the case of an attorney-client privilege, you also have to make a further showing that there is probable cause to believe that a crime or fraud was committed between that lawyer and his client. That's a very high standard, and it has seen multiple eyes before the warrant is issued. Now, it's not a surprise.
All right, everybody, we are now taking you out live. President Trump making his way to the podium at the Rose Garden to talk about tax cuts for the American workers and families. Let's listen in, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. You must have been looking at today's stock market. Pretty good numbers. Thank you all very much. It is wonderful to be here in the beautiful Rose Garden. Special place, special building right behind us, the White House. And we're going to discuss our massive tax cuts that are growing paychecks all over our country. They're creating jobs and expanding the American dream, just like we said would happen. That's the way it's happened. I want to thank all of the members of Congress here today who helped us pass these incredible tax cuts and into law. You know, for years they haven't been able to do it. They were unable to do it, not since Ronald Reagan, and we topped that one. But they called it tax reform. We discussed that, right? We discussed it. I said we have to call it not tax reform. Nobody knows what that means. That could mean a tax increase. We have to call it tax cuts. So we call it tax cuts and jobs. And guess what? We got it passed. I also want to recognize a great friend of mine and a man who's doing a fantastic job, Vice President Pence. Mike, stand up. Thank you. And members of my cabinet, they are working tirelessly. We have Secretary Mnuchin, Secretary Acosta, Administrator McMahon. Thank you. Please stand up. And all of the members of Congress and senators, thank you, and congressmen and women, thank you very much. Most especially, I want to thank all of the American workers in the audience. We have a lot of them who have traveled here from all over the country. They wanted to be with us. This event is dedicated to you, the hardworking Americans who make our nation run. You love your country. You provide for your family. You're proud of everything you've done. You've got that great extra strength that other people don't have. And you cherish a wonderful thing called our great American flag. And now, because of our tax cuts, you can keep more of your hard-earned money. Larry Kudlow's very happy about that, sitting in the front row. Right, Larry? Good. He says yes. Married couples won't pay a dime of income tax on their first $24,000 of income. A typical family of four earning $75,000 a year will see their tax bill slashed in half. Nobody thought they'd ever see that. Have a lot more money to spend. And we didn't get one Democratic vote. That's tough. In fact, I have to say, they want to increase your taxes. If they ever got into power, they have stated that they want to increase your taxes and spend money on things that you don't even want to know about. So we've doubled, very importantly, the child tax credit. They want so many other things, and people have wanted other things, and frankly, we fought very hard. We've taken care of our military for the first time in many, many years, $700 billion. We're going to have the strongest military that we've ever had, and can you think of a better time to have it, right? This is when we need it. We're going to have it. $700 billion, and next year, $716 billion. Also in that bill, $6 billion for opioid and helping us out with that horrible, horrible problem. The fact is, we don't care about the donors and the special interests. We only care about you and your family and really making America great again. That's what we care about. That's why we're here. From the day I took the oath of office, I've been fighting to drain the swamp. And sometimes it may not look like it, but believe me, we are draining the swamp. And there are a lot of unhappy people. You can see that every day. All you have to do is turn on the news. Every time you see me hit, you know that I'm draining the swamp. And people don't like it. But we're also defending the American worker. We're making incredible trade deals. We're taking NAFTA, one of the worst deals ever made in the history of trade, and we are redoing it, and it will be a fair deal for the Americans. We lost thousands of factories and millions of jobs because of NAFTA. Thousands, think of it, thousands of factories, millions of jobs. We're turning it around. Already Chrysler's coming back with auto plants. Many companies are now in Michigan, Ohio, different places, Pennsylvania. They're building beautiful, brand new auto plants. Nobody thought they'd ever see that happen. We've created 3 million new jobs since the election. Unemployment claims are at their lowest level in nearly 50 years. Think of that, 50 years. Something I'm very proud about, unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans have reached the lowest levels ever recorded, Think of that. Very proud of it. Remember, I used to say at rallies, what do you have to lose? Guess what? What do you have to lose? You have the lowest levels ever recorded for African Americans, Hispanics. I'm very, very happy about that. And by the way, for women, the lowest levels in 19 years. So we have really good numbers. And something a lot of people didn't think was going to happen, wages are rising at the fastest pace in over a decade. Of regulations. We've cut more regulations in a year and a quarter than any administration, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, 16 years. Should we go back to 16 years? Should we do that? Congressman, can we have that extended? You know, the last time I jokingly said that, the papers started saying, he's got despotic tendencies. No, I'm not looking to do it. Unless you want to do it, that's okay. We're also unleashing American energy and American energy independence. We're now an exporter of energy. We're doing think of this, $10 million barrels a day. Nobody thought they'd see this. 10 million. In fact, it's going to now be 10.6 million. We're cracking down on unfair trade deals. We're taking strong action to secure our border, stop illegal immigration, and restore the rule of law. And we've passed the biggest tax cut and reform in American history. More than 5 million workers have already received a tax cut bonus, a pay raise, or a new job thanks to these really massive tax cuts. Millions more. Millions more are getting higher take-home pay. No one has been more energized by our tax cuts than American manufacturers. With us today is the president of the National Association of Manufacturers, Jay Timmons. Where's Jay? Jay, stand up, Jay. Thank you, Jay. For 20 years, their organization has surveyed American manufacturers. All over the country, they survey.
And welcome back, everyone, here to News and Now, as we are taking a live look at President Trump speaking right now at the Rose Garden right outside of the White House, talking about tax cuts. Let's continue to listen in live here on News Now.
So true. In fact, today there is even more good news, and I wanted all of you to be the first to hear it. According to the latest survey by the National Association of Manufacturers, projected job growth for American manufacturing has just reached a new all-time high. So you think about that, the oil at 10 million barrels, and you think about the manufacturing. All you used to hear is that we're losing our manufacturing jobs. Jobs are being taken out of the country. They're coming back, and they're coming back fast. Projections for capital investment and wage growth have also set new all-time records. And we're just getting started. There is enthusiasm like we've never seen before. Companies from all over the world are coming back to the United States. Apple is investing $350 billion, with a B, $350 billion in an incredible campus and plants. So many other companies, far too many to name. And what they're really doing is giving their workers thousands and thousands of dollars of bonuses, something that we never really expected. Nobody thought of it. We did the tax cuts. We thought you'd have to wait till February. But you started seeing them very early because hundreds and even actually thousands of companies were giving massive numbers of whatever you want to call it. What would you call it, Mike? The thousands of dollars. What would you call that? We can't say it's a gift because they're workers. We can't say it's a tax because it's not a tax. But they were getting a lot of money, and so many, and a lot of companies didn't want to do it, and the people working for the company said, what about us? And they did it. They had no choice. In fact, another great announcement to share with you as well. Today I will sign a presidential memorandum directing the EPA to cut even more red tape on our manufacturers. So that they can expand and continue to hire and to grow. And I will say, this is about tax cuts today, but the cutting of regulations could have had the same or even a bigger impact on our economy. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. People were stuck. They'd have a factory, it would be under review for 10 years, 12 years, and then get rejected. You've seen what we've done with the pipelines and so many businesses all over our country that are being approved rapidly. We're getting highway approvals down from 20, 17, 15, 12, 10 years. We're getting them down to 1 year and 2 years. We're going to get the highways approved quickly. We're going to get our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our schools. No more waiting 18 to 20 years to get an approval, and then, by the way, they don't get the approval. And you may not get the approval, but it's going to be quick. It'll be a quick rejection. But you'll get them for the most part. And we will take care of our environment. Remember that. We'll take just as good, if not better, care of our environment. And we'll have better roads and better bridges and better schools. We're bringing back our factories. We're bringing back our jobs. And we're bringing back those 4 really beautiful words that you don't hear very much. We used to hear that 30 years ago. I won't say any more than that because I don't want to date myself. But 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was called Made in the USA. Do you remember? Yeah. Made in the USA. We're bringing it back. We used to hear that all the time. Now you're starting to hear it again. We know that. Today we have workers here from almost 50 American companies. I'd like to invite a few of you up here, and you're already up for the most part, to share the American people and with all of the folks that are here how the tax cuts have improved your lives. And we've had some incredible stories, actually. Joining us today are Derek Leathers and Quinton Ward with Werner Trucking in Omaha, Nebraska. Great place, great state. Where are you? Derek. Oh, he's a big guy. Come here, Derek. How about saying a few words, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Tax reform has already produced real benefits at Werner. Trucking is the engine that keeps America moving. And with the tax cuts, we've been able to increase our capital investment this year by $127 million, 90% of which is dedicated to trucks and trailers that are cleaner, safer, and better for the American roadways. We've also increased and announced increases of $24 million for our 9,500 driver associates. That works out to over $2,400 per professional driver. I want to recognize Marvin and Kathy with me today. Marvin is a 22-year Operation Freedom driver at Werner, 15 years in the U.S. Army, and 2 million accident-free miles delivered on America's roadways. Marvin told me that he and his wife are going to take an RV trip to Orlando to an important family reunion with some of the money that they've earned from the tax cuts. Kathy is a single mother of 2. She works in our driver analytics group and is proudly raising 2 beautiful children, and with her earnings, she's going to continue to support them on their quest for a college education. Mr. President, I just want to thank you for your hard work to invest, to free up the American economy, our businesses, and the men and women that make it happen. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to invite Quinton Ward, a driver of Operation Freedom for Werner Enterprises.
It's such an honor to be here today. This president understands that government doesn't create jobs, businesses and people do. The tax reform law puts money back in my pocket. It has a direct impact on me. You know, after leaving the military, I was looking for a good-paying career, and the trucking industry aggressively hires veterans, and especially Werner. And when I had the opportunity to work for the Operation Freedom Fleet, which emphasizes the hiring of military veterans, I was beside myself. I mean, it was a dream come true. Mr. President, you care about truck drivers, and we see that. You know, we cover this country and haul freight that keeps America moving every day. Thank you so much for fighting for us. This tax law means a better future for me and a significant pay increase this year, which will allow me to take my family on a trip that we've been planning for years but never quite made it. So on behalf of Werner and myself, I'd like to thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That's beautiful. And, you know, very importantly, the roads are getting a lot better. Do you notice? Those roads are getting better. The truckers were not too happy with the roads. They're getting a lot better. Also with us is Brittany Saxton, the owner of 600 Downtown, a pizzeria in Bellefontaine, Ohio. I hear it's great pizza, too. I heard from a friend of mine, they say it's great. Where's the pizza? Where's Brittany? Brittany, how good is the pizza? I've heard great things. Have to bring her with you next time, right? So, Brittany, tell us about what the tax cuts have done for your business and what they've done for your family and you, please. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump, my name is Brittany Saxton. I want to thank you for your leadership on tax cuts. I started my very first job doing dishes in my hometown pizzeria, where I have worked hard and earned opportunities to work up to food prep, waiting tables, and a manager and lead as my team. Today, I'm the proud owner of that pizzeria and very thankful for my tax cuts. With the reductions, I've been able to open my second restaurant, provide insurance and health benefits for my key managers in my company, and I've really seen a huge increase in our downtown Main Street economy boost. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to hear from Richard and John. They're Universal Plumbing in Las Vegas. And I don't know, did you do any work in any of my buildings out in Las Vegas? Where are they? Where are they?
Not yet, sir.
Anytime I'll take you. Richard, John, say something, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you for inviting us here today. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and other workers what your tax plan has meant to Universal Plumbing and Heating Company and our industry. After purchasing much-needed trucks, tools, and office equipment, which were long overdue, we're excited to share our tax cut with benefits with our 30 employees. In addition to seeing increases in their weekly paychecks, we gave bonuses of $500 and $1,000 to all our employees. We also increased our workforce by hiring several new employees. Mr. President, thank you for making this possible, and we appreciate all you do. And now I am proud to introduce John, a father of two, and an apprentice, and also he is a 21-year-old plumbing apprentice. John?
Thank you, President Trump, for everything you've done for our country and my family. I am a plumber. Me and my wife just recently had a son, Wrigley, born in January. He spent a week in the NICU. As the doctor bills started to come in, me and my wife are worrying on how we are going to pay for these doctor bills. And then our company, Universal Plumbing, came to us and gave all the employees $1,000 tax cuts. And with those, we were able to pay our doctor's bills. And I would just like to thank Mr. President for everything he's doing for our country, the workforce, and the apprentices, as I am a second-year plumbing apprentice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. Finally, please welcome Nicole Bergstrom and Brandon McMillan with Smithcraft Signs in Phoenix, Arizona. They have a great story to tell. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Wow. I'm Nicole, and I run Smithcraft Signs. We are a veteran-owned small manufacturing company. We're a job shop, and what tax reform means for me is what we can do for our team. To improve our capabilities for buying new equipment, we issued a special bonus to our mid-level employees. Deanne in our accounting department told me that she's using the extra money for what she describes as a dream bucket list vacation to visit her daughter, who was recently discharged from the Navy, who's now in Hawaii. Phil in NOAS is using the money for a bathroom remodel he's been planning for over 10 years. I'm very excited about what the future holds for us. And again, so many thanks.
Thank you very much. It's so beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon.
What a tremendous honor to be here today. My name is Brandon, and I'm a sales manager for Smith Craft Signs. My family is personally benefiting from tax cut. Due to a recent bonus I received, my wife, Andrea, who is a public school educator, is now able to stay home this summer with our 2 kids instead of getting a job. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. They're great stories and great success, too. And I know we'll see you in the years to come, bigger and better and stronger than ever. I believe that, all of you. Great stories. Thank you. I'm very proud to announce that we're getting along very well with respect to the whole very big negotiation that we're having with China. For many years, our country has been very much taken advantage of. I don't blame China. I blame our representatives, frankly. Too bad we couldn't have done it the other way around, but it didn't work that way. So China is negotiating with us very hard, very long, and we've made a lot of progress for opening it up and for getting rid of those tariffs. And I think you're going to see some tremendous business openings. President Xi, who's a friend of mine and a man I like very much, I think he actually likes me very much also, believe it or not. But he's for China, I'm for us. It's the way it works. But he announced yesterday that he'll be opening it up, a lot of barriers coming down, tremendous market. And let's see if we're going to do it in a very friendly way. I think we will. I think it'll end up the tariffs off and the barriers down. You know, as an example, if they sell a car into the United States under the old system, but it's currently going, but I think we'll make a lot of progress. They sell it, they pay almost no tax, 2.5%. We sell a car into China. Number one, they have a barrier. They don't want them. They want you to build the plant there. That's bad. But if you do get it through, it's 25%. So we get 2.5%, they get 25%. Somehow that formula doesn't work too well. Larry taught me that a long time ago. So we are changing it around, and it's going to be great for China. It's going to be great for us. I think it's going to work out really well. NAFTA, the same thing. We're negotiating with Canada, with Mexico, and we've made a lot of progress. We'll see how it all works out. The European Union, same thing. They have tremendous barriers. We can't do business. It's very hard to do business. We lost $151 billion in trade deficits last year. European Union. Sounds innocent, but it's been not good for us. So we're renegotiating that whole deal. All of this is going to mean a lot of business, a lot of tremendous business for our country. So America's greatest treasure by far is our people. And my administration hears your voice, and we have your back. We have your back. We're fighting to give every American, all over the country, every single American, a future of dignity and purpose and of pride. Because the jobs that just weren't doing it, they weren't there. They were being stolen. They were leaving our country. Companies were leaving, and they were firing. Now they're coming back, and they're hiring. And that's the way we want it. We're going to have tremendous growth in this country. You're going to be so proud of it. We were proud of our country anyway, but now you're going to really be proud of it because that American spirit is back. It really is back. It's the same spirit that linked our nation with railroads and highways, that dug out the great Panama Canal, and that put a man on the face of the moon. America was built by men and women like you who never give in, never give up, and never, ever stop believing in that great American dream. We are the ones who are shaping our own destiny. And you are the ones who are restoring our prosperity. You are the ones who are truly bringing and making America first again. And you are the ones that are taking us to levels that we have never seen before. That's what's happening right now. You're bringing our country to levels that we have never, ever seen before. So I want to thank everybody for being with us today, and God bless you all. God bless America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, fellas.
All right, everybody, welcome back here to News Now as you're taking a live look at our tower cam right now at 83 degrees, and it's going to be a windy day here, and to help explain that a little bit better for us is our very own Andrea Robinson.
Wow, well, hi, good morning.
Yes, good morning. So
happy Friday Eve.
Yeah, I love Friday Eve too. Anytime you get to say Friday twice in a week, you know you're doing well.
Anything that's connected to Friday is good.
Yeah.
No, we've got some changes weather-wise. Well, I mean, we've had kind of a warm stretch this week, our first 100-degree.
Yes, that came and we're like, now it's real.
Exactly. But the nice thing is we do have a change, and the change is going to include windy conditions, which right now, if you take a look outside, you can see the tower cam. You can actually see it shaking. But the winds right now are coming up from the kind of southwest at about 20 miles per hour. We're sitting at about 83 degrees currently right now, a little cooler in the outlying areas. But this is a pretty much a dry weather system that's pushing through the area, keeping temperatures right kind of at the normal mark, at least for today. But the winds are going to be kind of the concern.
So that's going to be the major story today, huh?
Exactly, is the windy conditions. And the thing is, you know, with wind gusts in particular, especially in the desert areas, you get the blowing dust, it kicks up, it reduces visibility when you're driving, that stretch of the I-10. We, of course, always want people to be aware of, you got to take your time. I mean, lots of semis are backtracking back and forth on that stretch of the I-10, then you have the wind, and the visibility is lower, and it can cause problems out there.
Sure.
And of course, the fire danger with the dry conditions and the windy weather. The satellite and radar, as we kind of pull out just a little bit, you can see further to the Pacific Northwest there. Everything that is any sort of weather maker is now kind of pushing off to the east. Everything, though, is still well to the north of us. You know, we talked this morning about the snow up in the northern part of California, Tahoe area, and so forth, but that's dissipating. It's moved pretty quickly. It's not going to reach us. That's the unfortunate part. We're just going to see the really windy conditions with this system. On the backside of it, though, we have a little bit of cooler weather for the next couple of days, and then we will get right back to the warmer weather. So today, and actually even tomorrow, you're going to notice breezy conditions tomorrow. Should be a little bit less than what we're seeing today and into the afternoon hours. Watches and warnings, though, right now. We have fire weather warning in effect until tonight at 9 p.m.
Pretty much look at that, the whole state almost.
The whole state. Everything's dry right now. We haven't had a lot of rain, and you know what happens. Those are like the perfect conditions for something to spark. So we're hoping, you know, everyone obviously takes that very seriously, and on top of that, you know, being outside, if you suffer from allergies or any sort of breathing problems, we always say, you know, it's probably not a good time to be out during the thick of it because it kicks it all up. But look at those wind gusts right now.
Look at Winslow.
Yeah. So these are wind gusts, okay? So this is the gusty, it's clocked at the, you know, strongest portion of the wind. It's not a sustained wind like the 20 miles per hour or anything like that. That's why it looks so high. But that just goes to show you, especially over the mountainous areas up north.
They might have to rename Winslow to Winds High.
Right?
Right?
Exactly.
Jeez.
So, but pretty much everywhere you look across the valley from north to south but this is mainly the northern half of the state. As we move a little further to the west, it's a little bit lighter, but again, that's just as that system continues to sweep through. That's what we're seeing. And obviously a little bit quieter in the lower desert areas. We don't have the mountain ranges for it to be kind of funneled in and really pick up speed. So that is what we'll keep our eye on all day. Right now, temps are this. You can see we still have that nice weather. You got to look for it a little bit, climb higher in the state to get it. The lower desert areas are right at the normal mark. So this is actually where we should be temperature-wise for this time of the year and across the country. It's actually looking better than where we have been over the last several days. We still have rain moving across the Midwest, but the snow has really lightened up significantly. Nothing right now, but rain moving across much in New York. New York's kind of wet this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. And even across the north, we do have from the Pacific Northwest, that system that moved across Idaho and into Montana, now seeing some, snow showers there. But light as far as comparatively speaking with some of the other things that we've dealt with over the last several weeks. Forecast highs for the state, again, I think we're going to pass those forecast highs because we're already in downtown Phoenix sitting at 83 degrees. So we should probably be more like 84, 85, which is normal.
Yes, yes.
We had forecasted earlier this morning, we thought more lower 80s, but it looks like we're going to get, more mid 80 range for everywhere else. And lows tonight, real comfortable, a little bit cooler tonight than it was last night. So that's kind of nice. But again, those breezy conditions will continue this evening. And then as we work our way through
Friday looking good.
75, perfect room temperature. And Saturday, a tad bit warmer. Sunday will be back above normal. And then you see that last for a couple days. We cool it down, we go back. So it's just this back and forth thing, which is, I guess if you look at that as an average, we're kind of where we should be.
And even next week looks good.
Yeah, not bad.
There's not even close to being 100 there.
Yeah, yep.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely take that. And what's something is now that we have our 100-degree marker now.
Yep.
Now the next thing we fare is 110, right? That dreaded 110. That's still a little while out, right?
Yeah, I don't think
we're good.
Yeah, I think June.
Yeah.
We don't see that real hot weather until June.
Sure.
Probably. So.
Hey, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, Andrea. Well, thank you so much for giving us the weather, and you're going to be doing the weather tomorrow on Easy AM as well.
You bet. Corey's off again, so.
Okay.
I'll share the weather duties.
There you go. Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Andrea. And we'll be back here with more News Now coming up next, everybody. And welcome back, everyone, here to News Now. We are taking a live look at the Washington Monument there in D.C. on this Thursday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here. Welcome to News Now as we take the top feeds from all across the country and right here in Arizona. Remember, when breaking news does occur too, you know we have you covered right here on News Now. Well, we're going to keep you out in the D.C. area. We're going to take you out to the Capitol right now, where Mike Pompeo right now is undergoing a Senate confirmation hearing. He was the former CIA director, now the nominee for Secretary of State. So let's listen into a little bit of that right here on News Now, everybody.
Which I think is at the core of your question. I think the president made clear he wants to get out, that he does want to have fewer American men and women there. We have fewer there today, men and women there today, than we had some period ago. Right? We're trying, Secretary Mattis is trying to get the footprint right there to achieve the American objective. It is also the case that we hope that we can find partner forces to help achieve some of the very same goals that you referenced in your question. But I think we'd all agree, to the extent we can achieve those objectives for America and do it with fewer American men and women on the ground and better diplomacy, that's the task that's before us.
And I know this was explored before, but I just want to ask it very simply. Does the president have the authority to launch strikes against the government of Syria?
Senator, yes, I believe that he does.
You believe he does. So you do not believe there should be there is a need for a new authorization for the use of military force to cover such an attack?
Senator, I believe that he has the authority he needs to do that today. I don't believe we need a new AUMF for the president to engage in the activity that you described. I think I said earlier, I'm confirmed. I'm looking forward to working with you. I do believe it is important that we refresh the AUMF, that we bring it forward, and we have current members serving who have supported the policies of the United States with respect to the use of force.
And let me just say in closing, because I was very grateful for our conversation privately, but I just want to have it set out there in the public. Myself and Senator Flake, especially that I would consider a specialist on our committee, Senator Coons, our focus on issues in Africa, from the Sahel region down to what I think Senator Flake asked you directly about, which was Zimbabwe.
Yes.
The feeling that I got from my trip recently was this feeling of neglect, not just from our foreign countries, but in many ways a yearning for more engagement from the State Department. Clearly, there are essential U.S. interests there. Clearly, the Chinese activities are something that I know you find concerning. I just want to make sure and hear for the record what you told me privately, that this will be a priority for you, that you will invest your time and attention to in a significant way, not only in boosting morale, filling positions, but also putting forth a real strategy to deal with everything from the humanitarian crisis in Sudan and Congo to the political crises and challenges we see in places like Zimbabwe and South Africa.
Senator, I think I confirmed that for you yesterday. I'm happy to confirm it here as well. Full scale, right, from humanitarian needs to all the other elements of U.S. diplomatic power.
Thank you, sir.
Before moving to Senator Markey, the refreshing of the AUMF you're talking about was the 01-02.
Yes, sir. I was thinking in particular at that point, that 2001 AUMF.
And I assume, again, when you talk about the strikes in Syria, the president having the authority, you're talking about surgical strikes, not prolonged efforts.
That's correct. Yes, Senator Corker.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pompeo, I'd like to look at your record on human rights a little closer. Next Monday is the 5th anniversary of the Patriots' Day marathon bombing in Boston. It, of course, was a horrific day in our history. And it was something that proved once again that we are Boston strong. But following those attacks, you falsely alleged that American Muslim leaders were, quote, potentially complicit in violent acts for failing to speak out, even though the American Muslim community and its leaders had already condemned that attack. Because words matter, Mr. Pompeo, I have to ask you, do you believe that your statements falsely accusing American Muslim leaders of being complicit in the Boston Marathon attacks exemplifies the kind of moral leadership that our country should have in the post of Secretary of State?
Senator, I think I answered this for you yesterday. I'm happy to do it here again. I'll answer the same way. I felt then and feel now that everyone has a responsibility to speak out about these terror attacks. The threat from extremist terror around the world remains in spite of all the good efforts and all the resources that have been provided. That's what I was speaking to that day in the aftermath of the attacks to which you referred, those horrific attacks. That's what I was speaking to. It is true that many leaders spoke out about it. I'm not sure that we ever get to a point where it's enough. And when I said to Senator Booker yesterday, I'm happy to share with you as well. We talked about it in a different context, but it is the case that different people have greater and lesser credibility on particular issues, and that's what I was speaking to there.
Right.
It is an imperative.
Do you apologize to the Boston Muslim leadership for those comments in relationship to that incident? Do you apologize to them?
Senator, it was not my intention in any respect to suggest that they were part of the chain of events that led to the attack. That wasn't my point at all.
In your opinion, were they complicit?
Senator, my statement is clear. We are all, to the extent we are silent, to the extent we don't respond to these, to the extent we don't make sure that our educational systems, whether they're...
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
This is it. We all are, Senator.
The Boston Muslim community came out and condemned it.
Senator,
is there any way in your mind that they are complicit?
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, welcome here to News Now Live with a breaking news alert. We're being told of a trailer fire happening right now in the valley. Our very own photojournalist Rick Davis at the scene. Rick, can you tell us where this is happening at?
Yeah, Mike, this is happening in North Phoenix around 29th Street and Paradise Lane.
All right, folks, so we just lost that shot right there from Rick Davis. We were just getting a shot there from a breaking news situation. So we'll try to get him back in just a little bit right here on the News Now. But there was a trailer fire happening there. And if we see that shot come back, of course, we'll bring it to you right here on News Now.
Driven over 600,000 Rohingya survivors to Bangladesh. What's your message to the Burma military with regard to how you view Muslim leadership inside of Burma who are fighting to protect the very existence of this Muslim minority inside of Burma?
American diplomats have and must continue to do our level best to stop this tragic activity. And that's the Burmese military in particular who is responsible for that.
Right. Well, I think it is important that there be a moral clarity that is uttered by the Secretary of State, by the President of the United States, about the Muslim population of the planet. You know, leaving an impression that somehow or other they are less entitled to full protection or respect for their commitment to human rights, I'm afraid says to those who wish to use the Muslim population as an excuse for actions that would otherwise be condemned is something that the United States leadership and you as Secretary of State potentially have to be responsible for dispelling on an ongoing basis. And that's what I'm afraid of in terms of the message that is sent, unless you explicitly make clear that in your opinion there are isolated instances of aberrant Muslim activity, but in the whole, that these are good people. They're religious people, and they have to be given all the full protections that every other religion and people are given. And that's your responsibility.
Senator, I agree with you. I'm happy to say that. I agree it is a tiny fraction. I think I've said that previously publicly as well. No one's brought that forward today. Perhaps I should have done so myself. But I agree. I agree with almost everything you just said there. It may be everything, but I'd need to go grab the record. With respect to treating them each with the individual dignity they deserve and to treating their faith in that way, I'm with you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I do wish the Buddhist leadership in Burma would conduct themselves a little better as it relates to the Rohingya. I will say that.
And I agree with you 100%. There's a religious struggle there, and I don't think that any demonization by any American of Muslims in general, as those being not respectful of human dignity, human rights, is very important. And I just think we have to hear it consistently on a bipartisan basis at every level, especially when we reach this level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Senator Markey.
I thought it was Merkley, but I'll go to Murphy. Okay.
Pretty sure. Markey, Merkley, Murphy, it's hard. Our ears are not.
No. I don't want to be standing too correctly. Actually, it's Senator Murphy. So I have a early bird rule here, and I sometimes get confused. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are belaboring these questions of authorization, and I suspect you know why. Many of us have had misgivings about how the executive has expanded the ability to act unilaterally without congressional authorization, both in this administration and in prior administrations. There are differences, though. President Obama didn't think he had the authority to launch missile strikes against Syria without congressional authorization. This administration believes it does. But the concern spans both. So I'll ask one last question on this subject. The rationale for U.S. military troops in Syria has been to fight ISIS, and I think many of us support that, even if we don't believe the authorization exists. We believe in the mission. The administration has started to signal publicly that there is a follow-on mission for our existing presence, which is to combat the influence of Iran in the future settlement of accounts inside Syria. Do you believe that U.S. troop presence is necessary inside Syria to try to stem Iran's influence? And if so, what is the legal basis for that activity?
Senator, I will concur with you. While it's complicated, the legal basis gets much more difficult. The clarity that I think we have today, it sounds like you may disagree about the clarity today. I think we're coloring inside the line there. It becomes much more difficult.
And do you believe that a troop presence is needed there to try to combat Iranian influence?
Senator, it depends on precisely how that mission is constructed. No, I think there are other places, lots of other tools in the American foreign policy toolkit that will allow us to achieve that. It may be the case that the president concludes that we've got to do it that way, that in order to achieve his goal there, and I'm confident that the administration will comply with the law if it chooses to do that. I think it's hard to. We've talked about the JCPOA singularly. We've talked about now this element of countering Iran singularly. We talked about sanctions on Iran singularly.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, folks, we are back out now. We have the shot back to us here of a trailer fire happening right now. We have our photojournalist Rick Davis there at the scene. Rick, can you tell us once again where this is happening at and what's going on? All right, so Rick Davis there is live at the scene here of a trailer fire right now. We're working to see if he could come and talk to us here. He might be trying to get a interview at this moment right here, so we'll try to check in with him in just a little bit. Rick Davis, can you hear us? All right, Rick. So Rick can't hear us. He might be trying to get a interview right now. We'll try to check in with him a little bit later right here on News Now here for you. We're going to go back out to the Senate hearing for just a quick moment. More News Now coming up next.
Privately, and that's how you perceive the utility of the toolkit that is given to a Secretary of State. And I'm of the belief that our foreign policy toolkit is badly misresourced today. I'm a big believer in peace through strength, but I'm not sure it makes sense to spend 20 times as much money on the military as it does on diplomacy, especially when countries like Russia are standing up all sorts of non-kinetic capacities in order to win friends and influence adversaries. And one of the frustrations we had with Secretary Tillerson was that he was fond of telling this committee that if we gave him $1 more, he would have no idea how to spend it. This was one of his favorite phrases when he met with us. And it just seemed to belie the reality of the world in which there are lots of threats that you
All right, everybody, welcome back here to News Now. We're going to be talking to our very own Steve Kraft right now, who is out on the roads right now as the wind gusts picking up right here in the valley. Steve Kraft, you are on right now. Welcome, and what can you tell us right now?
What's going on, Iron Mike?
There we go, there we go. So where are you guys at and where are you guys going?
Okay, well, let me show you. We are on I-10, and let's flip to that right now. We're going to be headed towards Tucson. We're getting reports of high winds around the state. We're noticing just the very beginning of the winds picking up, but they're going to pick up a lot more as the afternoon wears on. We just visited with the ADOT folks in their war room, and they told us that some of the winds up on I-40 are as high as 60 miles an hour by Winslow, and that's reducing visibility there. And the winds in southern Arizona, and that's the tricky part because there's so much dust that kicks up in the desert south of Phoenix, especially between here and Tucson. The winds will be 35 miles, 40 miles an hour, and then as you get towards the New Mexico border, up to 50-mile-an-hour winds kicking up. That means two things. If you're in a high-profile vehicle like we are, this truck basically that we're in, you're really going to feel that wind pushing you back and forth on the road. And if you have something that's even higher up off the ground than what we're in right now, you're going to have to really watch it. The other thing is there's a possibility of dust storms. And you're not seeing that at the moment. It looks clear, but it's in the distance is kind of hazy, and it's going to be more that way. If there is a dust storm, and typically they hit 2 to 4 in the afternoon, a lot of the times they roll across the desert, the advice that we're given is pull well off the road, turn your car off, turn your lights off so nobody follows and thinks that you're in traffic, and wait it out. Now, that might seem like not the way to go because you're on the road, you want to get somewhere, and you're afraid someone's going to smash into you from behind, but actually, you're a lot safer pulling off the road and turning everything off than you are going 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour plus in the dust where you really can't see where you're going. You don't know who's in front of you or how close they are until it's too late. We've had some terrible crashes over the years because people didn't get off the road as dust storms roll through the desert. And we potentially could have one of those situations now. It seems a little bit early in the year for that sort of thing, but when the winds kick up the way they're supposed to kick up today, that's why it's such a difficult situation. Now, the good news is these winds are going to usher in some very nice temperate weather over the next week. You know, temperatures in the 80s and even the high 70s, and that's a lot better, for me anyway, than temperatures that are 100 degrees this early in the year. So I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not qualified to talk about that. But I can tell you that that's one of the things going on here. We are looking at high winds, and so we're interested in it from the driver's perspective and keeping things safe. And coming back to me now live, we're just going to keep driving. Our job is to drive until we get into trouble. Or find trouble, not get into trouble, find trouble. And we're going to be talking to folks, we're going to be talking to folks in truck stops and rest areas and get some of their experiences. Some of the drivers that we meet are real pros, and they really give good advice. And other people are kind of amateurs like me, and, you know, they just, I guess it's a good learning experience for all of us, right? So that's the situation. We're driving down I-10 in the southeasterly direction right now, headed towards Tucson. And we'll certainly be in touch with you guys, and we'll let you know what we find as the winds kick up. I'm seeing some warning signs over the freeway telling people of the wind advisory, and I think it's only going to get stronger. I can really hear the wind, so I'm talking louder than I probably should, just because we can hear it beginning to pick up here on I-10. So back to you, Mike. All right, Steve, thank you so much, and you guys drive safe. And I'm glad you mentioned that tip there about pulling over there and shutting off your lights. A lot of people, especially if they're new to the valley, they don't know that and wouldn't think to do that. I know, that's so true, because you just feel like, as we go back out and looking at the road,
hey, I'm driving down the road. I want to keep driving down the road. I want to get where I'm going, and we'll make it through the, make it through the dust. And let's say you're from some other part of the country. You've driven through snow or rain. How difficult can it be to drive through dust? Well, it turns out really difficult, especially the dust we've got out here. It's blinding, it's thick, and it rolls through in waves and disorients people. And the proof is, I mean, how many of these dreadful accidents have we covered over the years? Some of them are chain reaction wrecks, and they're really serious things. So the smart thing is, the good news is, when there is a dust storm, it tends to come through pretty fast, and it tends to be gone pretty fast. It's not like going to sit here for an hour. It might be 5 minutes, and it kind of rolls by you. It could be 20 minutes, but it's not a big deal as long as you wait it out. So if we run into a situation like that, trust me, we're going to follow our own advice today.
There we go. Well, be safe, guys, and thank you so much there for the update, Steve.
You got it, Mike.
All right. Thanks again here, Steve. All right. More news now coming up next, everybody. We'll be right back. Thanks, Steve. Right now, can you hear me?
I'll find out in 35 days less.
Yeah, I hear you fine. I think we got the audio resolved. I'm going to blame it on the wind.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's good. All right. And
yeah.
What's the location, Rick?
So we're at 29th Street and Paradise Lane.
Okay,
Paradise
great.
Lane is about 3 or 4 blocks south of Greenway.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've got Captain Rob McDade. He's going to give us an update on this fire and what they're probably battling this thing with the wind and actually what all caught on fire.
Okay, great. Well, you're 90 seconds out, and we'll have you in just a moment here.
Okay, man.
Hey, that's right. We actually played a game.
Out.
Is a Fox 10 News Alert.
And welcome back here to News Now. We're taking a live look of a trailer fire that fire crews are at right now near the 29th Street and Paradise Lane. Our photojournalist Rick Davis is live at the scene. And Rick, what can you tell us here?
Yeah, Mike, Phoenix Fire is battling this trailer fire. Actually, it's a mobile home fire, 2 of them. We believe that they may not be occupied, but there is a concern about a gas line. And we have Captain Rob McDade here. He's going to give us some information, the latest on what's going on here. Captain, just talk about what you guys are battling.
So we arrived on scene. We had a working fire. In fact, we went defensive. We had quite a bit of fire. We realized it was an abandoned structure, that this mobile home had been on fire previous 2 weeks ago. Our biggest concern was the wind and protecting the exposures. We had quite a bit of fire, so crews had an aggressive attack to really get the seed of that fire and protect the exposures. We didn't want any buildings catching on fire. While we were fighting the fire, we realized there was a fractured gas line within there. So we still have an active gas leak out here. We've got Southwest Gas on scene, and we've got a hazmat crew on scene. What we need to do is protect that gas line, secure that leak, and then we can make sure that we can then continue getting all the hot spots out right now. So I searched, you mentioned the wind, and it is extremely windy out here. What type of a concern is that when you guys roll up on something like this?
So that wind is going to be pushing that fire, and so that fire then is going to help, aided by that wind, to then make contact and displace that heat and that fire onto surrounding buildings, areas. It whips it around. So as a firefighter, you might be inside interior. That wind outside is pushing it to a nearby roof line, another structure. So we had additional units that were on scene to protect those exposures. And now as we go forward, we've got a lot of hot spots in there, and that wind's going to whip it up. So we're going to be out here all day, coming back an hour at a time to make sure that those hot spots do not reignite.
So you mentioned that there was another structure. Was it because of the wind that maybe that one caught fire too?
Absolutely. We're looking into that. So you've got radiant heat from one structure on fire. You've got wind pushing those flames and that heat. Now you've got two structures on fire. So that obviously we're looking at that. It played a part in catching that second structure on fire.
Okay, thanks a lot, Captain.
Absolutely.
So Mike, there you go. They're battling, this fire, and if the wind conditions the way they are, they're doing the best they can, and it looks like they got this one out, but they're still concerned with that gas line.
There we go. Yeah, as they should be there. Well, Brent, thank you so much for giving us this live update here.
You got it. Take care.
Once again, thanks to our Rick Davis there live at the scene, giving us that update with the firefighter there as well. Well, we just have a little bit time left with you here on Fox 10 Extra. Thanks so much for joining us here today, as we really had a lot of top stories of the day. We showed you everything from President Trump live at the White House. We even clipped that on our YouTube page, so you could see it in full there whenever you'd like. It's on our YouTube page at fox10phoenix.com. If you haven't already subscribed, now would be the perfect time to do so, as you get alerts and breaking news alerts when we go live with anything across the valley or across our country. A lot of police chases that we cover too there as well. I know a lot of people always tune in for those. It's amazing how many people that we get for a police chase. People just always want to watch that. It doesn't matter if it's happening in LA, Texas, or even right here in Arizona. Just everyone across the country really wants to take part of those. So Fox 10 Phoenix is our YouTube there, and we have videos that we take from all day really, and we post it right there to our YouTube feed. But we're going to take you one more time out to D.C. right now, where that confirmation hearing continues right now for Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, now Secretary of State nominee. Let's listen into a little bit more here on News Now.
That said, I've never advocated for regime change here today. Or is it the one that said, should Mr. Kim vanish, given the history of the CIA, I'm just not going to talk about it? The most important thing we can do is separate those two, right? Separate capacity and someone who might well have the intent to break those two. Is it the one that says the historic conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, and now Russia, is caused by Russian bad behavior, which I agree? Or is it the one that stood alongside the president when he said much of the bad blood with Russia is caused by the fake and corrupt Russia investigation, headed by all Democratic loyalists or people that work for Obama? Is it the Mike Pompeo who said in his 2013 speech that the failure of Muslim leaders to repudiate acts of terrorism done in the name of Islam make them, quote, potentially complicit, or, unquote, in these attacks, and that this alleged behavior, quote, cast doubt upon the commitment to peace by adherents of the Muslim faith? Is it the one that in 2010 in a congressional campaign tweeted out to your supporters an article calling your opponent, an American of South Asian heritage, a, quote, turban topper, stating that you thought it was, quote, a good read? An article that you tweeted that said your opponent, quote, could be a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, who knows? Or as a member of Congress when you co-sponsored legislation that sought to slow the spread of marriage equality, when the Supreme Court endorsed marriage equality in 2015, the highest court in the land, you said it's a shocking abuse of power, flies in the face of centuries of shared understanding of our Constitution, co-sponsored a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, called Roe versus Wade one of the worst decisions of the Supreme Court, voted against the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, a bill that funds programs designed to help victims of violence that passed annually since 1994, and on and on. So the Pompeo I hear today, much more different than some of the Pompeo of the past.
And so I'm trying to figure out which is the one that is going to act if he gets confirmed as the Secretary of State, because some of these things are the past.
All right, so the grilling does continue there on Capitol Hill for Mike Pompeo, trying to be the next Secretary of State. Well, that's going to do it for us today here on Fox 10 Extra. Thanks so much for joining us here today as we took the top feeds from across the country. We'll do it again one more time here tomorrow for Friday. I'm Mike Page. Have a great day, everybody. All right, everybody, as we take now a live look at the Washington Monument there in D.C. That's going to do it for the morning edition here on the News Now. We're going to take a little break here and be back for you at 5 o'clock Eastern. Thanks so much here for joining us here on News Now.